A single finger lifts, a bang echoes, and that dark mage's arrogance vanishes along with his life. He collapses instantly, dead before realizing he was cooked, while poisoned knights scream amidst the chaos. As the field becomes a tomb, Prince Errol breaks the ultimate rule and unleashes his forbidden secret. He exposes a sliver of his dormant god-tier strength, not for fame or some dusty crown. He does it for her. This isn't luck. It's a terrifying beast hiding behind a toddler's innocent eyes. The world saw a frail, harmless kid, a total NPC the Empire completely ignored. He played dumb while snobbish nobles trashed him and assassins lurked in every shadow. They thought he was a zero. But when death came knocking, he answered with one silent, invisible shot. Errol isn't just gifted. He's a menace, because this isn't his first, second, or even 10th rodeo. Eons before this forest or palace existed, he had already conquered, bled, and ruled across ages. He's been respawned more than any human should. Grandmaster, legendary knight, but here's the kicker. Following a gruesome demise, he wakes up to a stunning woman gazing down at him tenderly. He tries to act cool, but his body is literally glitching. Why? He's not in a hero's physique. He's a straight-up infant. One minute he's thinking about romance, the next, he's wailing in a cradle. He knows the game has reset. While they see a cute baby, Errol is already calculating his stats. Isekai life, noble house, sweet mom, zero survival safety, and he's refusing to stay weak. He's seen too much. If this world glazes power, then he'll grind for it in the shadows. Right from the crib, when nobody's looking, baby Errol begins his secret training arc. He's pulling moves no baby should know, gathering mana, and testing ancient techniques while enduring the grind. He can't even escape a hug, yet a war-torn veteran is piloting this tiny skin suit. After too many game overs, he won't waste this run. Using forbidden mana techniques, he absorbs energy effortlessly. It's effortless. He's leveling up while napping or eating. He can barely hide his smug satisfaction. Pure hype. In 3 years, his mana capacity will dwarf most grown-up mages by age 10. The gains are insane. He's certain nobody in this realm can touch him, even in a century. The maid catches a weird vibe, but Errol's radiant baby smile instantly wipes her suspicions away. His mind is fixed on the grind, powering up until he rules like a king. The anticipation is real. He's impatient for his debut. 5 months in, and his mana absorption is already breaking the scales. His stats are skyrocketing. His internal core is surging way faster than any regular humans could. Mana flows automatically now. Even while crawling on the carpet, his grind never stops. Soon, he'll transcend every mortal limit. But then, something weird happens. He starts floating off the floor. Oh wait, it's just mom picking him up for playtime. He's stunned by the toy, but the second he senses his mother's disappointment, he pivots. He acts like a happy baby, though internally, he's dying from the sheer cringe. The ladies are vibing, laughing at how delighted the little prince seems to be. Honestly, who's this majestic at birth? Even as a veteran, Errol doesn't mind the ego boost. He credits his top-tier visuals to mom. To keep the vibes high, he keeps playing pretend. Infancy is fleeting. Suddenly, his face shifts, leaving his mother puzzled about what he needs. He's got one goal, food. He summons crocodile tears, putting his whole face into the performance. She gets the hint milk time, but as he drinks, the adult conversation turns dark. Financial trouble. He needs nutrients, but their bank account is draining fast. Mom looks totally helpless. The mansion's budget got nerfed. Raising a royal kid isn't cheap, and he recalls the maid's gossip. His mother is skipping meals, starving herself just to keep the household running. It's survival mode. He thought it was cap, but the reality of their poverty just hit. She plays it cool, claiming she'd literally die just to ensure the others survive the winter. Errol's anxiety peaks. Is their situation this cooked? His mother is just a low-ranking concubine. Despite birthing a prince, she remained a powerless nobody. As for her son, he inherited nothing but her lowly shadow. He lacked both rank and pull. If they didn't act soon, a dark tragedy was bound to swallow them whole. Our hero refused to roll over. A prince shouldn't be discarded like trash to perish before he could even walk. The king slammed every door in her face. As a lowly concubine, she was dismissed because his majesty was too occupied. Sudden clarity hit the hero. He finally realized exactly where his mother's carriage had been disappearing to every single day. She was desperately begging for an audience, only to be rejected. No matter how cold-hearted a ruler is, this crossed a line. Discarding the mother of your own flesh and blood is peak cruelty. Why torture her when the nobles were already making her life hell? Indifference is one thing, but this was pure malice. Tears welled up in the hero's eyes as his heart broke for her. His nanny handed him over to his mother. He was just an infant, yet he felt a burning need to save her. His mind raced for a solution, any solution. They just had to make it through the biting frost of this winter. Their pockets were bone dry, and the freezing cold would only skyrocket the cost of staying alive. He racked his brain for an escape plan. Then, like a bolt of lightning, a crazy idea finally took hold. If coal is just carbon like diamonds back home, then synthesizing gems here could be their golden ticket to absolute wealth. Since he couldn't earn gold, he would just create it. Only problem? His toddler legs couldn't even carry him yet. Scaling the bed was impossible, but he had a secret weapon. With his current mana reserves, he had another trick up his sleeve. Levitation was the key. He could literally fly to his goal. Plus, the palace was already dangerously low on coal. Luckily, the fireplace was packed with raw materials. He planned to transmute that entire pile with one decisive move. Time was ticking. He had to finish before the sun rose. He channeled raw thermal energy, cranking up the heat and pressure. The coal began to warp. He drained his entire mana pool without a second thought. Saving his mother was worth any price. He gripped the surging energy tight, forcing his inner power to the absolute limit, while his tiny body threatened to shatter. Success meant his mother could finally breathe easy. That was his only goal, to see her genuinely happy for once. He longed to erase her sorrow. Suddenly, thick smoke billowed from the stove. The hero had successfully pulled off the miracle. A breathtaking, radiant diamond sat within the ashes. It was perfect. Now, he just needed to plant it where they would find it. Victory tasted sweet. When dawn broke, the nanny stepped into the room and gasped at what was lying in the prince's bed. She was baffled because the bed was way too high for him. Had the poor child really spent the night on the freezing floor? As she scooped him up, she realized he was covered in grime. This neglected palace was becoming a total biohazard. It was a miracle he didn't freeze, but the hero didn't care. Only one thing occupied his mind right now. His mother's safety was paramount. Just then, the nanny spotted him chewing on something strange. Panicking, she begged him to spit it out. Had he choked? But the moment he opened his tiny mouth, her jaw dropped. A massive diamond sparkled inside. She couldn't fathom how he had found such a treasure, or why he was guarding it on the floor. Logic didn't matter. Selling this gem would net them a fortune. This single stone was their ticket out of hell. It was their ultimate salvation. She squeezed him tight, praising her genius little boy. Soon, everything began to shift. Caravans of supplies flooded the palace gates. Firewood and premium groceries arrived in heaps, all thanks to that one miraculous diamond. The sale price was insane, securing 5 years of luxury. But a nagging question remained. Was this actually the right move? What if it had an owner? That seemed unlikely. Though, this castle had been abandoned for nearly a century. Long before his mother arrived, it was empty. They eventually chalked it up to a divine blessing sent for the prince. His mother beamed with joy, certain that heaven was watching over them. The hero simply tugged at her hem. He was silently promising her to just wait until he was grown. He would personally erase every single one of her burdens. He visualized his future self, protecting her. Even if he was currently stuck in a toddler's body, he vowed to shake the world. One day, everyone would know his name. For now, the palace remained cozy all winter long. Food was finally abundant, and the nannies urged her to just focus on recovering. Her only job was to stay healthy. The atmosphere brightened as new staff arrived. Even the workers who were previously fired were brought back onto the payroll. Most importantly, his mother's sorrow had vanished. Her radiant beauty returned, accompanied by a constant, genuine smile. She finally lived in the comfort she deserved. A year passed, and the nannies began picking out the hero's first formal suit. The choices were okay, but his mother wanted something more regal. Honestly, he hated every single option they showed him. Dressing up was a total nightmare. What kind of crazy party required this much energy from a literal baby? Why couldn't they give the prince some space? Frustrated, he threw a full-on tantrum right on the cold floor. The staff rushed to coddle him, eventually rocking him to sleep. Finally, he could enjoy some much-needed peace and quiet. His nanny was buzzing with energy. Today was the big reveal, the moment they'd finally showcase the imperial family's youngest prince to the entire world. Hearing this left our hero completely shook. Was it actually happening? His mother was adamant. He deserved royal recognition, regardless of any perceived flaws. Royal blood surged through his veins, making his birthday the ultimate excuse. Even His Majesty couldn't skip this event. She felt certain he couldn't play ghost forever. Seeing her worry, Nanny tried to calm her nerves, whispering, "Fathers usually act distant toward their newborns." Our tiny protagonist was blindsided. Had his birthday really arrived so soon? Were they really hosting a massive gala for a tiny human? His mother, however, was absolutely glowing. This celebration would cement her son's status within the dynasty, ensuring the empire's laws finally protected his birthright. Errol's stomach was doing backflips, yet he managed to maintain a perfectly composed, adorable smile. A spark of thrill ignited within him, but a doubt remained. Would the high-ranking nobles actually show up? Deep down, he craved a glimpse of his father, the mysterious man who hadn't checked on him once since day one. As the gala kicked off, the ballroom teemed with elite nobles and servants. Our hero's mind began to race, questioning the insane price tag of this event. One thing was clear. Every guest looked straight out of a magazine. Was this high-fashion overkill the norm? He didn't hate the vibe, but the sea of strangers was overwhelming. The prince had never faced such a massive crowd. Sensing his anxiety, his mother whispered that everything was okay. She reminded him he was the star of the show. Still, the nobles were already throwing him some major shade. He tuned them out. Their petty opinions were irrelevant. Only one objective truly mattered in this moment. Where was his father, the emperor? He wanted to stare down the man who had abandoned his own blood and never bothered to visit. Eventually, he realized stressing over such a deadbeat wasn't worth his energy. He just needed to identify his face for future legal battles. Suddenly, the long-awaited main event finally began. The true royals had entered the chat. The imperial family arrived, prompting our hero to frantically tug his mother's gown. His eyes asked, was that the empress and her heirs? One look confirmed everything he had feared. They screamed royalty. She carried an undeniable aura of power, and her children were spitting images of their mother. The eldest heir stood front and center. Their cold, stone-faced expressions sent a literal chill through the air. They brushed past his mother like she was invisible. Despite the blatant disrespect, our hero's mother remained unfazed. She didn't let their mean girl energy affect her, gently asking if he was feeling okay amidst the chaos. She promised the ordeal would end soon. As she maintained her facade, he saw her eyes fixate on someone. She was staring at his father. The emperor radiated a suffocating aura of absolute authority as he approached. The room went dead silent as gossip ceased. Every noble and servant bowed as if their lives depended on it. Even our hero felt that crushing pressure. He couldn't tell if his father was actually acknowledging his existence or just staring at his mother. He cursed the fact that his reincarnation didn't include telepathic powers. That would have been a total cheat code. Guests soon lined up, showering the tiny prince with lavish birthday gifts. Meeting him was supposedly a huge honor. Then came the imperial family's turn to offer their well wishes. They didn't even try to mask their pure hatred for him and his mother. Their blatant disrespect was infuriating. He squirmed, itching to throw hands with that toxic woman. How dare she look down on them like that? She treated them like trash. In that moment, he realized every noble in this room was probably just as fake. He almost exposed their toxicity with a scream, but he played it safe to protect his mother's reputation. This place was a hive of snakes. Honestly, he just wanted to escape this nightmare as soon as possible. He was drifting off when a mysterious girl caught his eye. Just before sleep took him, he spotted her. She was likely another daughter from a concubine, looking just as out of place as he felt. His mother's focus had already drifted elsewhere. As the long, exhausting gala finally began to wrap up, both mother and son exhaled in relief. But deep down, they knew the real drama was just beginning. The empress glided toward his mother, a fake smile plastered on her face. She claimed their smooth arrival was entirely the boy's doing. With the crown prince shadowing her every move, our hero wondered if she was offering praise or just flexing her own son's status. Typical empress behavior. Without missing a beat, she called our hero adorable, though her eyes sparkled with a strange, hidden malice. She noted his striking resemblance to his mother, but Errol sensed the venom. He knew she was the architect of their misery. Why else would their budget be gutted so ruthlessly? They'd been reduced to burning their own furniture just to survive the freezing nights. His outfits were literal rags patched together by loyal servants. Yet, the empress had the audacity to wish him a long, healthy life. After tossing out some empty, scripted pleasantries, she swept away with a triumphant and mocking smirk. Suddenly, his mother froze. The emperor had appeared. He casually asked if she'd finally adjusted to life within the palace walls. Her response was polite, but the lie was obvious. Our hero was stunned by the emperor's sudden, clueless interest in their well-being. Honestly, he just wanted the man to pay up. It was high time the emperor provided the financial support they were rightfully owed. Right on cue, our hero wailed at the top of his lungs. Intrigued, the emperor reached out to hold the son he'd ignored for a year. He wanted a better look. To his surprise, the boy went silent, unlike his other heirs, who usually screamed whenever he was near. Instead, our hero flashed a brilliant grin, determined to outmaneuver this royal snob with pure, calculated charm. That smile worked like magic. The emperor was instantly impressed. Clearly, this kid wasn't intimidated by his overwhelming presence at all. Our hero started squirming, gesturing to be set free. His mother quickly explained that he was itching to move on his own. He was only 1 year old, walking should have been impossible. But then, right before their eyes, the little prince took a step. Errol knew the spotlight was on him. It was showtime. As he tottered forward, the entire hall gasped in pure, collective amazement. The prince had officially taken his first steps. Even the stoic emperor looked shocked, realizing this child was no ordinary infant. But our hero wasn't finished yet. He had to prove he was leagues above any other royal brat in this entire palace. This was his grand debut as Prince Errol. But the moment he lunged for the banquet table to steady his tiny body, disaster struck. He pulled the cloth, sending gourmet dishes and expensive wine crashing to the floor in a chaotic, messy heap. Glass shattered, and sauces splattered everywhere. It looked like a total accident, but in reality, it was exactly what he'd planned. This chaos was the ultimate endgame. Everyone was so hyped by his walking that they didn't suspect his clumsy move was intentional. Every move was perfectly calculated. He'd waited for the exact psychological opening to execute his little trap and expose the truth. To sell the act, he let out a tiny, pathetic wail, just a helpless baby caught in a mess, or so they thought. The Emperor lunged forward, sweeping the boy up to check for injuries. Luckily, he was only soaked in red wine, completely unharmed. He definitely needed a fresh outfit. Linka tried to take him, but the Emperor signaled for her to stay back for a moment. As the wet outer layer shifted, the horrifying truth beneath was exposed. The entire room went dead silent at the sight of his rags. Why was a royal prince wearing literal garbage? A heavy, suffocating silence fell, as the Emperor's gaze turned icy and dangerous. He demanded an explanation. How could his own flesh and blood be living in such absolute, disgraceful poverty right under his nose? The secret? That morning, our hero had channeled every ounce of his hidden energy into a singular, desperate goal. He ripped the cheap fabric apart with his bare hands, making the threads look ancient, worn out, and beyond repair. Magic made up for his tiny baby muscles. All that mattered was dragging the palace's filthy secrets into the light for everyone to see. The hidden rot was finally exposed. Now, the Emperor demanded that Errol's mother explain how this disaster was even possible. How did it come to this? Was dignity too expensive? His mother trembled, paralyzed by the weight of the Emperor's intense pressure. Seeing her genuine fear, the Emperor finally relented. Instead, he snapped his attention toward his chief advisor, Gina, with a lethal glare. He roared, demanding the exact figures for the concubine's maintenance. How could such a massive, insulting oversight even happen? The advisor stammered that the funds were supposedly split equally. On paper, the distribution looked perfectly fine and fair. Equally, the Emperor hissed. He demanded the full financial ledger be brought before his eyes immediately. Seeing his father's fury, Errol knew things were getting real. He was dying to see those cooked books finally exposed. His mother tried to downplay the situation, but Errol held firm. He knew this was their one and only shot at salvation. The tension in the room became electric as the secretary laid the official documents directly before the Emperor. Everyone held their breath in anticipation. One look at the papers, and the Emperor's eyes widened in sheer, murderous disbelief. Enraged, the Emperor incinerated the reports with raw magic. Errol was shocked he'd actually assumed the old man was in on the plot. It really was the Empress's handiwork. Turning his icy gaze toward her, the Emperor demanded to know why the accounts were empty. While the late consorts were left with nothing but scraps, the Empress played a much more dangerous game. She masked her face in perfect, mock disbelief. With eyes cold as ice, the Emperor demanded to know if she truly took him for a fool, considering every single coin in the budget was her direct responsibility. The first prince scrambled to shield his mother. Stepping forward, he desperately tried to frame the disaster as a mere misunderstanding. He swore the Empress was innocent, but the Emperor's expression only hardened into granite. Excuses meant nothing now. A leader carries the weight of their subordinates' sins, and through her sheer neglect, his youngest son had been left starving in rags. The eldest prince shot a guilt-ridden look at our protagonist. Our hero found the sight pathetic. To him, it proved the brother lacked a king's presence, and possessed zero of the Empress's trademark cunning. His father loomed over him, questioning his mother's involvement once more. The Emperor stepped toward the Empress, voicing his crushing disappointment. Our hero's mother rushed forward, pleading for mercy. On the Empress's behalf, taking all the blame, the Emperor's brow furrowed in total confusion at her sacrifice. By carrying his bloodline, she was royalty herself. A deep, flustered blush crept across the lady's face. The Emperor gently brushed her hand, reminding her of her true standing. But that tender moment ignited a flash of pure malice in the Empress. He immediately commanded the culprits be hunted down and executed. He vowed never to tolerate such incompetence again. The Empress bowed her head, her fingers trembling with hidden fury. She stammered a promise, but the Emperor's final warning was chilling. Next time, the punishment would fall on her head. She groveled, swearing to hunt down the scapegoat, all while feigning total ignorance of the Emperor's white-hot rage. She then turned to our hero's mother with fake tears, acting clueless about how this tragedy even happened. Our hero saw right through her performance, even as his mother frantically tried to smooth things over. His mother's kindness made no sense. The viper standing before them was clearly the one pulling all the strings. The Empress promised it was over, but her lack of remorse was insulting. She held every woman in the palace cowed. And so, our hero's birthday concluded with the budget gap buried. The Empress walked away completely untouched. A low-ranking noble family was tossed to the wolves as a sacrifice. No trial, just a swift, brutal execution. Whispers filled the halls that the poor souls even confessed after enough persuasion from the palace guards. No one could explain how they spent that kind of fortune. The court was just relieved the bloodbath had ended. But our hero knew the truth. The real monsters were still walking free. The case was slammed shut. The injustice tasted like ash, but he swore they'd pay in blood once he came of age. For now, he was just a hungry infant. His only weapon against the world was a loud, frustrated wail. As he was spoon-fed, he plotted. To survive this palace of snakes, he needed to forge a body of steel. He'd be stuck in this tiny form for a while. After some thought, he chose his next move. After finishing his meal, he drifted off. He woke later to the sound of a carriage pulling up outside. Guests arrived, and curiosity got the better of him. He used his powers to float toward the window. While his nanny was fast asleep, 3 sets of footsteps echoed toward his nursery door. It was his mother, an adult, and a child. Panic surged if his nanny woke now. His secret power was out. He couldn't let them see him flying. He dove back toward his bed just as the door creaked open. They walked in to find him pinching the nanny's face. His mother gasped, telling him to be gentle. She lectured him on respecting his caretakers. The nanny jolted awake, realizing a high-ranking guest had arrived. She scrambled to offer a greeting, but the visitor just brushed off the apology with a graceful wave. She had arrived unannounced. Our hero's eyes widened. He recognized her. It was the concubine, Finalia. The staff fretted over the lack of a proper welcome, but the mistress explained her visit was strictly private. She demanded a private audience with his mother. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy and serious. His mother prepared for a confrontation, but nearly choked on her tea when Nalia bowed in a sincere apology. She felt disgraced by her behavior at Prince Ariel's birthday banquet. Her family were once legendary war heroes. During the Great Wars, her bloodline was the Empire's strongest shield and sharpest sword in every victory. But glory is fleeting. With no male heirs, their fame was rotting away into nothing but palace gossip. Years of financial ruin had taken their toll, prompting his mother to ask if domestic chaos had driven Finalia to her door. Finalia confessed they were drowning in debt, likely a calculated strike from the Empress's shadow. Framed for the missing treasury funds, she offered a meager pouch of gold in a desperate attempt to apologize. She offered a heart-wrenching apology, knowing full well that forgiveness might be a distant dream. She resigned herself to being the family villain, until the door creaked open to reveal the truth. Her daughter stood in the distance, and his mother realized she was only trying to shield her child. To protect her blood from the imperial vipers, his mother refused the money with unexpected grace. She saw the victim behind the tragedy, but Finalia begged her to stop with the pity. "It's not pity," she countered calmly. "We simply have zero reason to be enemies. Grudges were a waste of time." She returned the gold with a resolute expression. She suggested buying a gift for the little girl instead, sensing their dire financial struggle. The Empress was weaponizing the budget, likely because his mother had once served her directly. That revelation hit Ariel like lightning. Now he knew exactly why his mother was the main target. His sudden distress panicked the nurse, who had no idea how to soothe the young prince. Ariel masked his inner turmoil with a baby grin, calming the nanny's nerves instantly. Assuming the prince was just being moody, she left to train with Princess Kanya instead. Seizing the silence, Ariel focused his energy to eavesdrop on their high-stakes conversation. His mother spoke of surviving the Empress's iron-fisted reign, where every breath was a battle. She vowed to guard Ariel until adulthood, offering Lady Finalia a hand in true friendship. This wasn't just a friendly gesture. It was the birth of a powerful concubine alliance, a secret pact to ensure that no one would ever have to face the darkness alone. A lifeline in a den of vipers. Ariel was absolutely floored by his mother's tactical mind. He never imagined she understood the imperial power struggle so deeply, let alone prepared for it. While he was lost in thought, that same little girl suddenly loomed over his crib. She materialized from nowhere, invading his personal space and crawling onto his tiny bed. She started squishing his cheeks like dough, ignoring his silent pleas for a quick rescue. "He's too cute," she squealed, while Ariel realized he was officially her new favorite toy. The nanny only encouraged the chaos, while the princess promised to return for more fun. Time moved at breakneck speed, and suddenly the little prince was already 30 months old. His 3rd birthday loomed, making him realize how absurdly fast his new life was moving. His goal remained: reach adulthood and finally live a normal life without any more redos. Suddenly, the princess burst into his room, a whirlwind of chaotic energy and noise. Ariel tried to vanish, but she found him instantly, leaving him utterly drained and miserable. She demanded a game of hide and seek, dragging him outside before he could even protest. Since that first meeting, The princess had become a permanent, exhausting fixture in his daily life. With the nanny's blessing, they were building a bond that felt suspiciously like a real friendship. Kanya constantly boasted about being the best big sister, promising to look after her tiny brother. She demanded a vow. He had to protect her once he finally reached adulthood. Ariel still couldn't wrap his head around why she was so obsessed with his toddler self. She admitted the truth, playing with Ariel was way better than dealing with the other royals. He gave a nervous laugh, certain she'd cringe at this wholesome phase once she grew up. She scooped him up like a plushie, declaring it was time for their next mission. Her affection was borderline suffocating, nearly squeezing the life out of the poor prince. A maid finally intervened, warning that such rough play might actually break the little prince. She reached out to take him, reminding the princess to keep her royal chaos in check. Lugging heavy gear is no job for a kid. Errol breathed a sigh of relief, thanking the heavens for the save. Princess Kanya threw a total fit, screaming that she wanted to play. Unfazed, the maid suggested some quiet drawing time. Or perhaps a classic story? Kanya snapped, calling it all a bore. She wanted to wield a blade, period. Exactly like her brother Kyle. As she swung a stick, our lead noticed her center of gravity was completely cooked. Even for a branch, her balance was non-existent. Since fencing was his first love, he couldn't help but stare. He missed the thrill. Meanwhile, the princess visualized her imaginary foe defeated and declared herself the ultimate winner. Then, the maid dropped a bombshell. If Kyle and Leonard could train, why couldn't she? The maid simply countered, "Royalty doesn't get dirty, so don't argue with ancient traditions." Above all else, the maid insisted on one thing: princesses must be graceful. Suddenly, the maid realized her blade vanished. A second later, Kanya was clutching it tight. Panicking, the maid screamed about the live steel while Kanya geeked out over swordsmanship. The chase was officially on. She begged for the weapon back, pleading for Kanya to at least swap it for a smaller, safer trainer. Our guy watched, low-key impressed. Kanya was growing on him. Fast forward and our hero hit age 5. Riding lessons began. Still a tiny kid, they asked if he was ready to mount a real, breathing horse. The prince played it safe, sticking to his own mount. Nanny sighed, admitting not every boy needed horse fever or sword skills, but he needed some passion. She feared he'd be an outcast, but our hero just smirked. He told her to drop those cliched tropes. The knight in shining armor? Total relic. Nanny absolutely loathed that. She was powerless to stop him. Meanwhile, he reflected on his past lives, realizing his skills were strictly combat-based. He only knew how to make people kneel. From absolute sword mastery to crushing his enemies, he was lethal. He'd slaughtered thousands and conquered magic. Every hardship had honed his abilities into something terrifyingly close to perfection. Now, he was bored out of his mind. Nanny kept nagging him to hit the books and focus up. Once the door clicked shut, he collapsed. Hard work? Yeah, that was definitely for losers, not for him. He played the pity card, whining while trying to find his zen. One fact stood out above the rest. He just hated studying. At age 5, most kids are just beginning to soak up the world's basics. Learning from every angle? Hard pass. He didn't want to know nothing, but he wasn't interested in traditional schooling. He just couldn't care less. Someone even joked that he sounded like he'd lived 100 lives already. That hit a little too close to home. He played it cool, sinking back into his chair with ease. He muttered that he'd reached his limit. The smothering was real, and he was tired of the same old lessons. Over and over again, Nanny dragged him to the library, citing imperial law as the reason for his suffering. Formal schooling starts at 5. He stared at the endless shelves, wondering why on earth anyone needed this many books. Was he really expected to read all these? He grabbed one and immediately started spinning it like a pro. Spinning was the only fun part. Nanny snapped, "Read them, don't spin them." But he wasn't stopping. Our hero started building book forts instead, driving Nanny's blood pressure through the absolute roof. She lectured him on how many kids would die for this opportunity. He had a golden chance he was wasting. He needed to respect knowledge and sit straight. Meanwhile, his brain was working overtime on an epic escape plan. Returning to his room was priority 1. Utilizing his newest talent, he hit the floor and turned on the waterworks. He wailed about not wanting to study, but the moment Mother walked in, the act died instantly. Finally, he buckled down. He knew he needed to learn, but being a genius in this palace was dangerous. High talent equaled a massive target on his back. A gifted concubine's son was a threat to the throne. Enemies would move quickly to erase him. Fair or not, everyone already had their roles assigned by destiny. Our hero took matters into his own hands. He literally started drooling to play the part of a fool. Nanny begged him to focus. This wasn't just for him. His mother's future depended on his success as well. Being brutally honest, he asked if studying was mandatory, considering his world-class laziness level. Nanny warned that his slacking would break his mother's heart. That was the one thing he couldn't let happen. In this life, he'd commit to the grind. He'd master everything except fencing. That was his hard line. Picking up a blade was a death sentence. No magic either. If he avoided both, he might actually survive. What kind of future awaited him, despite everyone's expectations? 7 days later, Nanny arrived with news. A tutor had arrived to drill the prince in magic. Our protagonist instantly recoiled, refusing to become a mage. If he revealed any actual talent, he'd surely be sucked into lethal political games. He sat on a massive ocean of internal power and desperately needed to mask his true strength. But Nanny gave him no choice. She grabbed his hand, promising it would be over in a flash. Stepping into the hall, he found the teacher frozen in disbelief. He could see mana pulsing through the man. He wondered why his vision was so sharp. The teacher moved in and began his physical inspection. He muttered that the boy was gifted. The crowd watched, praying their prince was a legendary genius. However, the verdict was brutal. He couldn't detect even a flicker of mana within the boy. It defied all logic. But no matter how hard he searched, there wasn't a single drop to be found. He stifled a laugh. On the way, he had meticulously sealed off every single one of his mana circuits. He crushed his energy into a tiny speck and vented the rest. The mage's shock was pure satisfaction. Mission accomplished. Without visible mana, detection was impossible. But this success had an unexpected side effect. The master stated that if magic was out, the prince would be forced to train as a knight. Even peasants usually had a spark, yet the prince seemed to be a complete void of energy. He questioned his choices. All he had done was crush his mother's heart with this false failure. Yet, it was essential. The world needed to see him as nothing more than a frail, powerless kid. Internally, he apologized for being such a disappointment. Meanwhile, a swordsmanship instructor arrived at the estate. This new teacher promised that with enough sweat, the boy could reach his own level of strength. He analyzed the knight, barely 25. To him, the man looked like a clumsy, overgrown puppy. Having endured 100 lifetimes of carnage, his soul was forged in the fires of unimaginable horrors. Nightmares this knight could not even fathom. Who did this amateur think he was, trying to teach him? Regardless, he requested the training. He played the eager student, though he knew they weren't even equals. The tutor preached patience. Mastery would come with effort. He started with the absolute beginner basics. He recalled his friend, Princess Kanya, who used heavy weights just to build her core strength. The knight shrugged it off as a family trait. So, what move was left for him to make? Randall kicked things off, lecturing on balance and fluid movement. He picked a basic drill to demonstrate. He told the boy to relax, perched him on a stump, and commanded him to stand perfectly still. Instantly, he faked a struggle, wobbling around as if he were about to take a dive. He whimpered for the scary height to stop shaking. Next came the flexibility tests, which he botched too. After failing those spectacularly, the knight finally decided it was time to pick up a real blade. His accuracy was absolute trash. He looked at his mentor, feigning heartbreak over his lack of talent. The knight reassured him, saying it was only day one. Together, they would eventually conquer these basics. But mid-conversation, he sensed eyes on him. Someone was lurking in the shadows, observing his every move. He knew that by acting mediocre, he would become invisible to the vultures circling the palace. Gossip spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire court was whispering about the manaless prince. It was the only topic in town. Spies reported back that the boy was so weak he could barely stand. He was supposedly talentless with a sword too. Hearing this, the empress could not hide her wicked satisfaction. He smirked, knowing these lies would make his enemies careless. Later, while grabbing a meal, he asked about his next tutor. Nanny promised a quick arrival. By then, the useless prince label had stuck. Every elite tutor had turned him down, except for one brave soul, Gamel Pernia. He was tasked with teaching languages. One look at his face told our hero the man did not want to be there. He was clearly here against his will. He slammed a heavy stack of books onto the table. He barked that they would finish grammar in a day. The pace was insane, moving to new topics every 24 hours. He could not grasp why the man kept pushing so hard without once caring if he actually understood. Was this tutor seriously going to ghost him during every lesson? Little did the man know, our young hero was already a linguistic beast. Having mastered countless tongues across his previous lives, his gift for languages was straight up broken. To start his grind, he snatched up a grammar guide and some ancient lore. To him, every new language was just a puzzle, with familiar patterns waiting to be solved. Conquering them was only a matter of time. He pulled an all-nighter, and by sunrise, the prince was asked if he'd actually finished. He claimed he had. The tutor was totally shook, but our hero knew that. Compared to the dialects of neighboring lands, the imperial tongue still had some tricky bits. The teacher handed over a book to test his bluff. For any average brat, reading a text like this before age 12 was impossible. Then, he started reciting perfectly, blowing the man's mind instantly. After all, a legendary student meant a massive boost to a teacher's reputation. So, the man quickly decided to hype the boy up as an absolute prodigy. Suddenly, the entire empire was reeling, because this magicless prince was supposed to be a total loser. How could a failure with 0 mana master complex languages in just 48 hours? The Genius Prince title spread like wildfire, and the source was simple. The tutor got a little wasted and spilled the tea about the prince's insane talent. Eventually, the rumors reached the emperor's throne. He realized that if his son couldn't wield a blade or magic, perhaps the path of a grand scholar was his true destiny. He began to believe his son was a true genius, while his consort only sighed, feeling like she'd failed to raise a proper heir. She noticed how much he'd transformed and questioned if she was even doing this parenting thing right. The emperor spotted her distress and leaned in. He asked if she was really that anxious about the boy, because in his eyes, our hero was becoming something legendary. Meanwhile, the prince was playing 4D chess. He planned to reveal his miracles in small doses to keep everyone hooked without exposing his full hand too soon. While still a kid, he'd just vibe and enjoy the perks of being a genius. Days later, a massive night guard was deployed, clearly his father's work. Since our hero was a glass cannon with 0 combat skills, he needed some serious heavy backup. He appreciated the gesture, but a sudden loud commotion killed the mood. The nannies were lugging in something incredibly heavy. As he wondered what was up, his mother revealed these were personal care packages from the emperor himself. He was shocked by the sheer volume of loot, but opening the crates revealed nothing but high-end jewelry. Every piece was a priceless imperial treasure, but our hero only cared about their hidden stats and abilities. Items like these usually just drained the user's mind and left them zonked. Still, the nannies were totally simping for the bling, obsessing over how refined they looked. They saw pretty ornaments. He saw raw mana pulsating inside the gems. He had 0 use for these baubles and even considered handing the whole haul over to his little sister. She'd been grinding her training way too hard lately. He turned to his mom, asking to gift one of the pieces to Princess Kanya. His mother didn't see the harm. Losing one shiny rock wouldn't hurt their stash, but she asked what he even saw in her. He panicked and just said she was built different and super strong. It was a massive win for the castle because the emperor had favored the prince. Our hero sat at the table as his nanny served up elite pastries crafted by the realm's top chefs. But after one taste, he realized the kitchen was failing him. The luxury treats were totally mid and lacked any real sweetness. The nanny offered to fetch the chef, but after a beat, he told her to summon an alchemist instead. She was floored. But our hero was only dreaming of 2 things: cola and chocolate. That's why he needed an alchemist, to brew up those legendary modern flavors. Since she couldn't read his mind, she asked why a kid needed a scientist. He realized explaining modern cravings was a lost cause. A 5-year-old demanding an alchemist sounded totally unhinged, but without a pro, recreating the flavors from his previous life. The stuff he actually loved was straight up impossible. He had no clue how to chemically engineer cola from scratch, especially in a world with 0 tech. He wanted that cold, fizzy kick so bad. How was he supposed to get it? Still, being a genius meant finding a way. He suddenly bolted for the door, shouting that he was off to study. The nanny was stunned. She definitely didn't see that coming from him. Our hero knew that cooking was just low-tier chemistry, and to experiment with it, an alchemist was mandatory. Fast forward 3 years, the prince is now 8 and sitting in a high-level meeting about trade routes and bridges. The officials asked for his take. He called the plan fire, but then, he had a question of his own. When asked who drafted the blueprint, one architect beamed with pride, certain the prince was about to shower him with compliments. But the prince's warmth chilled instantly. He spat a cold warning. Bring such garbage again, and he'd be finished. He barked that, while it looked pretty, heavy winter snow would turn this structure into a death trap. The foundation was unstable. One heavy snowfall, and the whole thing would buckle under the pressure. He lashed out, noting the architect chose flashy vanity over the actual safety of the citizens. The bridge's core purpose was abandoned for ego. With a sharp flick of his hand, he demanded a total overhaul. It was clear his otherworldly intellect meant a mountain of work. He was already outthinking the empire's top ministers. Utilizing advanced concepts from his previous lives, his blueprints for the future seemed almost legendary. There was no time for rest. This was his era to shine, so he dove straight into the next crisis. Just then, a new maid caught sight of him. She whispered in awe, calling him the silver-haired sage. That title hit like a truck. He never expected such a dramatic nickname to stick to him. "Where did you hear that?" he groaned, ordering her to drop the title. The maid nearly blurted it again. She caught herself just in time. It was embarrassing. People were basically making fan fiction nicknames for him now. To him, it was pure cringe. Meanwhile, his mother was searching for him until the nanny dropped the news. He had requested an urgent audience with the emperor himself. His goal? To master the forbidden art of alchemy. Riding in the carriage, he realized the emperor's instant approval meant he was now the favorite son. Everything he did was for the kingdom's glory. Still, despite living multiple lives, facing his father was nerve-wracking. He needed to be smooth, making his ambitious requests sound like a natural benefit for the crown. Standing in the royal study, he argued that alchemy was the key to ultimate imperial power, and he wanted in. Since he wasn't built for swords or sorcery, science was his only weapon. The emperor watched him closely. He saw a boy with the wisdom of an old soul. He agreed, promising the finest alchemy tutors money could buy. The prince had finally secured his dream. Once the word got out that Prince Ale wanted a teacher, every alchemist in the land swarmed the palace, desperate for a chance to train a royal prodigy. The trial was simple. Forge a mirror capable of throwing a beam of light to the very horizon. One man rose above the rest, executing the task with flawless precision. His name was Darman Longet. Our hero was stunned. He expected a dusty old scholar, but instead, he got a surprisingly young master. The man's hair was wild. He even asked if that ghostly white shade was actually natural. Darman explained that years of inhaling toxic fumes and dancing with volatile chemicals had bleached his hair bone white. The prince wondered how the man was even standing after breathing in that much poison for years. Darman looked composed, but the prince knew better. Alchemy was a cold, merciless mistress that didn't forgive mistakes. If you blew yourself up in the lab, that was on you. His new teacher made the stakes crystal clear. This wasn't just studying. It was a dangerous gamble that often demanded a blood sacrifice. But he was ready. He wasn't looking for cheap parlor tricks like turning lead into gold. He wanted real results. He aimed to engineer unstoppable alloys and revolutionary materials to build a futuristic empire. Darman was electrified. This boy wasn't just a royal. He was the genius the rumors promised. Realizing he was facing a future legend, the master knelt and locked eyes with the young prince. He swore to pass on every secret he possessed. After a few intense sessions, Darman grew suspicious. He asked if the prince had been secretly practicing in the shadows. The question caught our hero off guard. Was his brilliance that obvious? He played it cool, claiming he'd just skimmed a few old scrolls. The teacher beamed, taking it as proof of his insane talent, while the prince sighed in relief. He'd successfully dodged the suspicion. From that night on, the lab fires burned well into the morning hours. Armin was a constant shadow, guiding him through the most complex alchemical formulas. He mastered lead extraction with ease. Aside from a few weird charts, it mostly mirrored his past life science. The learning curve was non-existent. Everything was going according to his grand design until a new petition surfaced. The prince officially requested to quadruple his alchemical staff. He was ready to take things to the next level. He summoned the empire's brightest minds instantly. His aide trembled, wondering what chaos the young prince was cooking up. Why bring in all these alchemists? With the treasury already bleeding from their research, a public riot felt inevitable. Yet the emperor recalled his son's unwavering conviction. He sensed the boy's vision was the key to their future glory. Meanwhile, our MC dropped a bombshell. He wanted an alchemical beverage. The experts stared in total confusion. Why waste a genius intellect on a mere drink? Disappointment rippled through the ranks of the elite scholars. They'd abandoned prestigious projects for this. But our lead flashed a smile, promising them a life-changing payday. Win or lose, the cash was guaranteed. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted, and the alchemists were all in. They'd seen basic tonics before, but what was his angle? Little did they know, he held two ultimate wildcards. Wealth and glory, the ultimate motivators. It was time to race against the clock, to craft a legendary soda. Days later, exotic mineral samples arrived for testing. One skeptic scoffed, doubting the murky liquid was even safe to swallow. It looked absolutely repulsive, but our protagonist knew this was just the rough draft of his master plan. If nature wouldn't provide, they'd simply manufacture their own water. The alchemist's jaws hit the floor in shock. Synthetic water sounded like madness, until our MC tossed them a set of revolutionary blueprints. He challenged them to refine his theory, waiting with absolute faith in his hand-picked dream team. Our lead bolted to start the field tests, but could they really pull off a miracle in just 7 days? He knew cold, hard cash could make men move mountains. 1 week later, the team reconvened for the big reveal. This breakthrough would shake the empire's foundations. He proclaimed a new era, the reign of sparkling, carbonated water, the literal engine of progress. Perfection was hard, so he aimed for refreshing, sparkling water as their first victory. The team was skeptical, who'd buy this? He just gave them a knowing smirk and told them to trust the process. Blend it with spirits or fresh fruit. He craved Coca-Cola, but knew replicating that secret formula was a fantasy. They whipped up several batches for a taste test. The second he squeezed fresh lemon into the fizz, it was pure magic. The alchemists stood frozen, unable to process how delicious their creation actually was. The prince's lemonade vanished from shelves instantly, going viral far beyond the empire's borders in record time. It transformed into a high-end luxury for the elite. Nobody could fathom that the useless prince was the mastermind. Every noble craved a sip of the legendary elixir. Meanwhile, the icy lord of the north, Count Dement, demanded the truth behind the creator. Could the little prince truly be the genius behind this phenomenon? Intel confirmed the unthinkable. Ariel himself was the sole architect behind the entire operation. The beverage supercharged the economy overnight. Whispers spread of endless wagons overflowing with gold coins, heading straight for the concubine's palace. The count cursed his arrogance for underestimating the boy's potential. He dismissed him as a typical kid. Had he known, he would have pounced. Now, he was drowning in regret. Now 16, the princess was a force to be reckoned with. Her prowess left him truly awestruck. She was a vision of power. Even the maids gossiped about her flawlessly sharp and lethal fencing style. She completely outclassed every boy her age. Our MC couldn't help but find her fierce energy quite adorable. After a grueling session, she took a breather, noting that his name was on everyone's lips lately. His divine water was a global hit. People were hailing him as the emperor's most flawless successor. Jealousy toward his mother reached a fever pitch, but our lead's focus remained on elevating his mother's lineage. The Ernest family had fallen from grace, clinging to a noble title with absolutely zero future prospects. Stripped of wealth, they lived like peasants in a crumbling estate. Realizing their desperate plight, our hero stepped in, granting them a stake in his soda empire. Demand exploded as crowds swarmed the shops. Desperate fans paid triple the price. He followed up with yogurt and MSG, sparking yet another massive sales frenzy. Their wealth went parabolic. They were now in a league of their own, surrounded by undeniable, glittering opulence. The princess seemed oddly emotional, sparking our hero's concern. He tried to cheer her up with lemonade and waffles. Instead of a thank you, she pressed a cold blade to his neck, declaring she had enough gold. He lacked spine and steel. Demanding he master the blade, she forced a training regime he only feigned accepting. Internally, he loathed the physical labor. Still, he half-heartedly mimicked her strikes to keep the peace. He prayed she'd quit bugging him, but her burning ambition was impossible to ignore. Obsessed with strength, she swung her steel with lethal grace. That delicate girl was gone. Her growth was monstrous. Our MC realized he'd have to lock in just to stay ahead. Post-grind life hit different. Now, every street corner was packed with fans screaming his name. The hype was insane. He was basically a local superstar, and the ego boost was real. Why the imperial summons? Was it a prize, or was his father's cold silence a trap? Desensitized to the tension, he sat down and began devouring the high-tier snacks provided. He was finally getting comfortable. Then, just as he took a bite, the vibe shifted. The emperor threw a curveball, a legit government post. This was happening way too fast. The king promised a smooth transition, certain that nobody would be foolish enough to object. Hard pass. Palace life was too much baggage. He calmly sipped his tea and spoke. It was a massive offer, but his soul still belonged to the world of alchemy. Being named the official heir would trigger chaos. Plus, the rival empresses were acting suspiciously quiet. Their sudden silence was terrifying. He knew better than to step over the line now. Playing it low-key kept him safe, but attracting the king's direct gaze? That's dangerous territory. A bloody battle for the crown wasn't the plan. Fighting his siblings sounds like a nightmare. Was the king baiting him? Probably. After all, the law of the jungle rules this palace. Humanity is just one big power struggle. The strong thrive, the weak get trampled. Why stress over lethal politics? He was over it. Soon, he was galloping toward the horizon. He rode further than ever, savoring the liberation. The burnout from his desk job was real. He never planned on becoming a bored bureaucrat. Once, the entire world was his playground. He used to hunt legends. Nostalgia hit like a truck, making him cherish this fleeting escape. He was determined to enjoy this. He rode with his sister, the mastermind behind the trip. She didn't know he was a pro rider. "Why is a whole squad following us?" she asked. The soldiers looked ready for war. She thought they were overkill, but he just laughed it off. "True freedom is getting rare," he muttered. Then, his laughter died. He felt something. A foul energy radiated from the woods. This wasn't a normal animal. It felt wrong. He yelled for them to set traps, but they ignored him and marched right into danger. A night revealed this was her training spot. Our hero was actually floored by that news. Training here? Is she fearless? He recalled the moment she first brought up this fun ride. "Aren't you bored of paperwork?" she teased. Now, he finally saw what she was really up to. His sister was straight up reckless. To her, this was an adventure. Today, she got her wish. He stayed by her side. He trusted her, even if she was a total chaos gremlin. She took command. The strategy was simple. Knights lure them in. Princess strikes from the shadows. She flanked the pack. With total ice in her veins, she challenged 20 orcs alone. First time seeing orcs up close? Terrifying. But with her skills, they had the upper hand. Her speed was insane. That dominant aura she radiated made everyone around her feel invincible. The skirmish lasted until twilight. Exhausted, he asked her if she was still in one piece. She definitely needed to vent. "Don't tell a soul," she pleaded, maintaining her royal mask. Her reputation would crumble if this leaked. Beneath the steel, she was still just a girl. "Why this?" he asked. Her expression darkened as she finally let out the truth. All her life, they said princesses shouldn't fight. They treated her dream like a childish phase. They waited for her to quit, marry a stranger, and live a life of silence. He realized that for nobles, marriage was a transaction. Family legacy always came before love. She despised the high society script. Her only wish? To live with the freedom he had. She craved status and riches, aiming to master her true calling, serving the mighty empire. Winning over the masses was key. After all, our protagonist was already a local legend. She sought to bring family glory through pure merit, not marriage. Her destiny was hers to forge. Seeing her resolve, our hero gave his full support. She smiled, calling him the best brother ever. She suggested retreating to the distant moonlit fortress before the first rays of dawn touched the horizon. A dragon emerged, yet the oblivious crowd ignored the beast, while something tried to crush Kanya. An orc uprooted a tree, charging the princess with a primal scream, but her blade silenced him instantly. Surrounded by orc corpses, the guards watched in awe, realizing she had basically soloed the entire horde. The knights knew to stay clear of her path, nearly pitying the poor orcs she slaughtered. Kanya cleaved through two more before Errol shouted for her to finish up. Time was running out. He grinned at her shocked expression. She had entered a bloodlust trance again, but he did not mind. With her foes annihilated, she took a smug moment to breathe before reluctantly agreeing to head out. To her surprise, her steed was totally spent. Errol pointed out, the poor animal was just drained. He offered her a seat on his horse while professionals tended to her worn-out mount. The duo mounted up together, with Kanya taking the reins since her riding skills were top tier. Being the shorter sibling, sitting behind and trying to steer would have just been a total vibe kill. They dashed across the lush fields, outpacing their escort, when Errol suddenly sensed a disturbance. He halted abruptly, alarming Kanya. His eyes scanned the heavens, feeling a presence looming above. He felt an invisible threat, a massive, lethal entity, lurking behind the thick cloud cover. A wyvern! Errol snatched the reins before the reality of the situation even registered with the others. He yelled for his sister to hold on tight, then screamed a warning about the monster above. He commanded the guards to flee, but they hesitated, stubbornly refusing to believe a threat they could not see. These grounds were supposed to be safe. The emperor had allegedly wiped out every wyvern in the region. Mid-sentence, a knight was snatched up, his body dangling as the beast soared over their terrified heads. Pure chaos erupted as the realization hit. It was not just one. They were surrounded by monsters. Amidst the confusion of the sudden swarm, Errol spurred his mount into a desperate sprint for survival. Knights were devoured or pulverized by massive talons as the scene devolved into a bloody struggle. This was not a hunt, it was a slaughter. The beasts were choking the air with lethal, poisonous fumes. Their brute power was scary enough, but the toxin was a game-changer. Soldiers were dropping like flies. Heartbroken, Kanya watched her men fall. Errol commanded her to focus only on holding tight as they fled. Their pursuer began exhaling venom, but a mage managed to strike back with a searing fireball. Cries to defend the princess echoed, but the overwhelming numbers made the situation look completely hopeless. With resistance to Class 4 spells, these beasts were untouchable for most mages. One began circling the siblings. Forced to act, Errol channeled mana into his fingertips, blasting the beast with high-velocity magical projectiles. A beast plummeted, and while he could have downed more, he played it cool to hide his power. He casually credited the mages for the kill and pushed the horse forward. Suddenly, disaster struck again. A wyvern intercepted them, paralyzing the duo with fear, until a blonde warrior intervened at the last second. A female knight executed the beast instantly, barking orders for them to seek shelter deep within the woods. Impressed by her god-tier skills, Errol vowed to repay her later as he escaped the horrific carnage. They hit the tree line just as a sinister voice began mocking the pathetic humans from the shadows. Stopping the horse, the prince demanded an explanation for the taunt. The reply was chillingly immediate. Wicked laughter erupted from a shadowy mist. A cloaked figure emerged, gripping a menacing magical staff. His features were obscured by darkness. Errol aggressively demanded the stranger reveal his true identity. Eyeing the mysterious staff, Errol asked the intruder exactly what kind of sick game he was playing. The man simply smirked before leveling his staff at the siblings with lethal, cold-blooded intent. He launched a lethal magic barrage. Instantly, Errol realized one terrifying truth. This power was overwhelming. It annihilated the ranks. Reacting on instinct, he jerked his horse around, shielding Kanya from the devastating explosion. Looking back, he saw fallen knights and charred corpses. The mage mocked a compliment toward Kanya's quick escape, but Errol was the true savior. While Kanya trembled in fear, Errol's suspicion and focus reached a fever pitch. How did this mage know her? Was she the target? Laughing, the sorcerer offered the royal siblings a twisted show. A sinister grin spread as his eyes flashed. Raising his staff, obsidian energy spiraled around his wicked frame. The prince felt the suffocating aura, but Kanya's panicked gesture snapped him back. He followed her trembling finger. There, dead knights and wyverns began to stir. Necrotic energy leaked from their corpses as the survivors recoiled. They backed away from the shambling corpses. The mage barked a command for his undead to slaughter Princess Kanya. He screamed that he would teach that arrogant king a lesson they would never forget. Fury radiated as the undead horde surged forward. Suddenly, a flicker of genuine confusion crossed the mage's twisted face. Errol's hand was raised again, his fingers locked in that lethal stance, determined to safeguard his sister. If Kanya was the target, Errol would strike first. He launched a high-velocity mana bullet at his heart. The mage let out a final, garbled scream before collapsing. Kanya stared, stunned, asking what had just happened. The surviving guards were equally baffled. Errol played it cool, suggesting the mage's own spell might have backfired. High-level magic is risky like that. But despite the mage's death, his undead minions continued their relentless march. The knights braced for a second round. The mysterious blonde girl who saved them earlier reappeared. She screamed at them to retreat. A dazed Kanya wondered why the monsters were still moving without their master. The curse should have broken. Apparently, the spell was a timed trigger, independent of the caster's life force. It was set on a timer. "Trust me," Errol whispered, and they vanished into the tree line. As their brave soldiers held the line, darkness swallowed the land. The royal pair eventually sought refuge in the woods. Sheltered by a cliff, Errol struggled with friction sticks, while Kanya sat paralyzed by the uncertainty of their fate. He promised her the undead would soon vanish and that their search parties were surely nearby. She admitted she only saw him as a bookworm, not someone who could survive in the wild. Errol chuckled, telling her never to doubt a scholar's resourcefulness. Physics and friction were on his side. He had studied the theory. Errol considered using mana, but Kanya's intense gaze made the risk of discovery too high. He couldn't blow his cover. Despite his burning muscles, a tiny spark finally blossomed into a warm flame. They watched the dancing embers in silence. As the adrenaline wore off, Kanya's expression crumbled into pure despair. She sobbed that everything was her fault. Errol insisted it was just a tragic accident no one could foresee. "Are you scared?" she whispered. Looking at her, he shared her vulnerability and confessed he was terrified as well. Yet, having her there made it bearable. Those wyverns were nightmare fuel. She gazed at him with newfound sympathy. Believing he was truly rattled, she scooted closer and grasped his hand, whispering her deepest gratitude. She knew without him, the day would have been a massacre. She was shaking uncontrollably from the trauma. Only then did Errol see her true fragility. Their entire escort had been wiped out to save their lives. This was the bloody reality of the Imperial line. Kanya was finally staring the family's dark fate in the eye. He felt the crushing weight of their situation. Clinging together by the fire, Kanya finally succumbed to exhaustion. One thought haunted Errol. They weren't safe yet. Survival meant they couldn't afford a single moment of weakness. A bone-chilling roar shattered the silence. High above the cliff, two beasts clashed in a mid-air deathmatch. A griffin and wyvern were locked in combat. The griffin plummeted, with the wyvern diving like a hungry shadow. Errol spotted a hidden nest. That wyvern was hunting the griffin's young. The parent reached the ledge just in time, but the wyvern's fangs sank into its throat. Below, the helpless chick shrieked as the brutal struggle continued. With a final, agonizing shriek, the griffin fell. Its massive weight caused the very cliffside to crumble and collapse. Errol lunged, dragging Kanya away as boulders rained down. They barely managed to scramble to a safe distance. The griffin's corpse and debris slammed down, kicking up a blinding dust cloud. They coughed, squinting through the haze. Fortunately, the wyvern vanished. Perhaps the stench of blood masked them. Then, Errol suddenly went cold and stopped talking. Shadows shifted, and his sister was gone. She was already kneeling by the fallen griffin, partially buried under jagged boulders. Errol lunged forward, shouting a warning of lingering danger. But Kanya remained eerily calm, whispering the beast's heart had already stopped. Frustration bubbled in Errol as she ignored him, but Kanya's eyes welled with sorrow while staring at the massive, lifeless body. A faint smile played on his lips as he asked if she wanted a burial. "Not the mother," she clarified. "The baby." The legendary beast had sacrificed its life for its offspring. Kanya was already cradling the shivering chick, checking for injuries. Errol stood paralyzed, wondering how she'd even spotted the creature. He cast a suspicious glance at the griffin's cooling remains. He wanted to wash his hands of this mess, but options were thin. Before he could even finish that thought, Kanya dropped a bombshell. She wanted to keep it. She was beaming, while Errol felt a massive headache coming on. Suddenly, The golden-haired knight's voice cut through the air, flooded with relief to find the royal siblings unscathed beside the carcass. As soldiers swarmed the area, Kanya clutched the chick tighter, offering a bright, relieved greeting to their rescuers. With the dark mage eliminated, casualties had ceased. But then, a piercing shriek echoed, making the fair knight jump in terror. The realization dawned on her, while Errol noted dryly that the reinforcements had arrived at the perfect moment. His sister was dead set on adopting the beast. How this would actually work was anyone's guess. 7 days passed, and the chaos subsided, save for one tiny problem. Their household now had a new, feathered resident. The baby griffin pounced onto Errol's bed with a deafening screech. Groggily, the prince tried to shove the pest away, but one pathetic, puppy-eyed stare completely broke his resolve. He couldn't help but pet the adorable creature. It was staying, at least until the mother appeared. Back then, orders were issued to usher the princess away for some much-needed rest. They needed to dispose of the body before scavengers arrived. As tents were pitched, the cleanup began in earnest. Scanning the camp to ensure no one was watching, Errol unsheathed his blade over the griffin while everyone was busy. He sliced into the beast's chest, retrieving the glowing mana stone required to truly bond with the griffin chick. Errol marveled at the radiating gem. Suddenly, the rumble of carriage wheels signaled a very familiar arrival. The princess practically teleported out of the carriage, screaming for her new favorite companion, Fry. The chick bolted toward her in a flurry of feathers. As they reunited, Errol pulled the general aside to discuss the assassin. The man who targeted Kanya was now a wanted fugitive. Oblivious, the princess just laughed and played with her hands. As Fry soared in circles above, the general confirmed his scouts were hunting for any lead on the dark sorcerer. Suspecting a conspiracy, Errol sighed, questioning who harbored the deepest grudge against the imperial bloodline. The list of enemies was endless, but the general's confused expression led Errol to simply end the conversation. Laughter and praise for Fry filled the hall. Watching Kanya command her pet with such joy warmed Errol's heart. Targeting such an innocent soul was truly demonic. Errol knew he had to become her invisible shield. Danger was still lurking, and Kanya was the only family he had left. He wouldn't let anyone touch her. He had to master his aura before turning 20. Masking his resolve with a grin, he invited his sister to play. Clutching her griffin, Kanya eagerly agreed, though she was clearly curious about what kind of fun he had in mind. A second later, steel clashed. Errol's gaze transformed, locking onto his sister like a predator eyeing its target. She hadn't signed up for a duel and let out a shocked gasp. Sliding back, she dropped into a defensive stance. Blown away, she demanded to know what that was. Errol just beamed, eager to demonstrate his secret self-taught progress. Kanya was floored by his skill. To think he'd mastered such a feat entirely on his own was mind-blowing. He was merely infusing mana into his strikes, the absolute basics. Hearing this almost moved Kanya to tears. Hadn't she been struggling with this for years? Errol quickly reassured her that his methods were just unconventional. After explaining the shortcut, she hailed him as a genius. He promised that she too could master her internal mana. Her expression radiated pure joy. "You really think I can?" she asked. Errol's grin only widened in response. He promised that under his elite guidance, she'd be a pro in no time. After all, he was a top-tier mentor. The secret? He was stealthily pumping mana into her system whenever she dozed off during their garden tea parties. Locked away in the training hall, the real work began. Outside, the blonde knight listened to the intense instructions in disbelief. Kanya became a permanent fixture in his training room, honing her aura control with a dedication that shocked even Errol. Her progress was explosive. Finally, a brilliant blue aura ignited, dancing along the edge of her blade. Success at last. Mana finally flowed through her, and even Fry looked impressed. Mom was truly legendary. But there was a catch. Her overwhelming aura caused the cub to hit a massive growth spurt. The griffin clung to Allie's back, becoming a heavier burden daily as Kanya's journey officially began. With Errol as her guide, she mastered the basics. He taught her that greater mana capacity meant unstoppable power. He hyped her up, imagining her legendary charge into the heat of battle, while riding Fry. Kanya laughed, teasing Errol for his wild imagination, while he just grinned and gave her pet a squeeze. When she asked for a shot at it, he promised that her moment would arrive sooner than expected. Suddenly, the grand doors swung open. The Emperor had arrived, commanding the room's attention instantly. Errol and Kanya froze in shock. Why on earth was the Emperor making an unannounced visit? Mom followed behind as maids bowed low. Errol was confused. Wasn't the Emperor supposed to be buried in paperwork? Being this far north meant this was no social call. The Emperor and their mother approached with serious faces. The kids bowed. With a proud smirk, their father mentioned he'd heard whispers of Errol's new sword training. Mom smiled warmly as Errol came clean. He admitted science wasn't enough. He needed something more hands-on. Following the chaos, he'd committed to learning self-defense and the art of taming griffins. His father's genuine pride was unmistakable. Errol just scratched his nose, trying to hide a smug grin. He wondered, did his father finally see his true potential? Was he finally better than the rest? Servants brought in a mysterious chest. Errol couldn't look away, dying to know what was hidden inside. "It's for you," his father said. Inside, a masterfully crafted blade gleamed with lethal elegance. His father insisted he test it. "Custom forged just for my son," Mom added with a radiant smile. Though Mom worried he was too young, Dad insisted that every boy craves the weight of real steel. He wanted Errol to wield a weapon of true power. He wouldn't let his son settle for less. Errol raised the blade, making his parents nervous. Staring at the shimmering steel, only one thought crossed his mind. This was epic. For a split second, he actually considered becoming a full-time master swordsman. The Emperor noted the fire in Errol's eyes. He had never seen the boy look this genuinely hyped, but Errol quickly played it down, flopping to the floor with the blade to keep things chill. He had the talent, but revealing it meant constant combat. He wasn't about to be dragged into endless battles. That hectic life wasn't for him. He wouldn't throw away his carefully crafted low-profile existence now. His secret was safe. He thanked his father, acting humble and claiming he wasn't worthy of such a masterpiece. He suggested that a blade this legendary belonged in the hands of a prodigy like Sister Kanya. Kanya was a beast. Her power rivals that of the Imperial Knights. She was already among the elite. Errol was still leveling up, but he knew Kanya was destined for the top 30 warriors in existence. She deserved the spotlight. The Emperor caught his drift but issued one stern condition for the transfer. Kanya had to go all out. She froze in terror, and Errol was equally blindsided by the request. Why was his father so thirsty for a fight? Then, the realization hit him like a freight train. The Emperor was a total sword fanatic. He demanded Kanya showcase the true extent of her progress. "Just land one blow on me," he challenged. Kanya stood there, completely paralyzed by the sudden pressure. Seeing her panic, Errol gave her a nudge. He signaled for her to stop hiding and show her true power. This was a golden opportunity. Errol smirked inwardly, knowing Kanya's hidden strength would definitely leave a mark on Dad. The showdown began, right then and there. As they faced off, the Emperor noted her perfect, steady stance. Her form was solid, but not enough to win. Was Dad really underestimating her this much? Without hesitation, Kanya lunged. She blurs toward the Emperor with speed that defied the naked eye. She was a blur, even Mom couldn't track the movement. Meanwhile, Errol was absolutely vibing with the chaos. Kanya's speed was elite tier. Her raw strength and mana control were honestly on a whole different level. But why was the Emperor smiling? Was he really not fazed by this insane display of power? In a flash, the Emperor parried the assault effortlessly. Not bad. The Emperor marveled, claiming he'd only seen such a terrifying aura in his high commanders. Was this power actually real? Aurel, who'd been mentoring her, played it cool. He claimed he was merely experimenting with a simple, unproven theory. It worked flawlessly. To push a warrior's limits to the absolute max, he'd used his own sister as a guinea pig. She was the perfect fit. As the Emperor's curiosity piqued, Aurel's sharp instincts suddenly kicked into high gear. His old man was definitely plotting something annoying. But Aurel realized the Emperor's ambitions were actually far more grand. The Emperor was likely envisioning an unstoppable legion of mass-produced Aura Knights to conquer the world. Aurel broke the news. If his father expected Kania-level results from every soldier, he was in for a total letdown. His sister was a prodigy who'd trained since birth. This insane power level was the result of raw, god-tier talent. Plus, her grind was non-stop. The Emperor's face soured at the answer, but Aurel held the real secret close. Sure, anyone can level up by fixing flaws with the right method, but there was one massive, exhausting catch. Training a bunch of dudes one by one sounded draining. Seeing nothing but sweaty soldiers daily was his literal nightmare. A total testosterone fest. His eyes deserved better views. Yet he couldn't just flat out reject the Emperor's grand plan. To avoid suspicion, he decided to label it a forbidden, top-secret technique meant only for an elite, chosen few. Basically, an exclusive skill locked behind the Imperial bloodline. The Emperor paused, weighing the gravity of his words. Aurel hoped the message landed. To the Emperor, the nobles were scavenging hyenas who'd likely weaponize any secret knowledge. Would they serve the throne or stab it? Why empower future rivals? Finally, the Emperor gave his firm nod. Fine, it stays in the family, the Emperor declared. Aurel's face beamed with pure, unadulterated relief. His legacy was set to last for generations. A secret imperial martial art, it sounded insanely cool and prestigious. He grinned, realizing every one of the Emperor's kids was now officially stuck in a brutal training hellscape. It was a golden opportunity. Within a month, the Emperor had already ramped the training intensity to the absolute limit. Using her as the gold standard for this unique style, many were deemed too weak to even handle it. One fact was undeniable: Aurel was a total game changer. Without him, the Empire's rise wouldn't be this legendary. His growth was lightning fast. Later, while Aurel enjoyed his favorite treat, a messenger arrived to summon him. It was time to pick his personal guards. Elite candidates were flooding in, their applications stacked incredibly high. These were the Emperor's hand-picked finalists. Aurel stared down at the massive mountain of resumes before him. Most were from high-ranking noble houses, the same people who'd looked down on him just a few years ago. Back then, he was nothing to them. Now, he was a superstar, though he knew this fame was unavoidable. With his godlike skills, guards were basically useless. But there was one past tragedy he refused to repeat. He wouldn't let his life end in misery again. The princess wailed in disbelief, making Aurel's head spin. Why not just pick 3 at random? Duke Merman agreed he could, but suggested a personal touch instead. Aurel nodded. Playing the interviewer actually sounded fun. The files before him were packed with every detail imaginable: skills, feats, and backgrounds. Asha noted it was a total information overload. Aurel just wanted to save his eyes. He only had eyes for beauty. Bored out of his mind, Aurel suddenly dozed off, leaving everyone completely baffled. Snapping back to reality, it was finally showtime. It was time for Aurel to meet his potential guards face to face. He'd hoped for stunning beauties, but what he got was terrifying. The candidates were literally screaming their lungs out. Their auras were absolutely bone-chilling, despite being women. Aurel's heart sank in pure, unadulterated disappointment. His daydreams were way better than this reality. As he turned pale, he stubbornly insisted he was totally okay. He told them to brush it off. Realizing this wasn't a fairy tale, he faced the reality of elite knights. This was the look of true warriors who grinded daily. Dream time was over. It was time to get to work. Commanding their attention, he officially kicked off the interview. These women weren't just intimidating, they were the real deal. Their strength was no joke. One candidate actually looked more jacked and shredded than the Emperor himself. With monsters like this guarding him, he'd be untouchable. Then, a more traditional noblewoman caught his wandering eye. She stood out with her grace. But picking one was a nightmare. Every single candidate had delivered a flawless performance. He sent them out to gather his thoughts in silence. But he was stuck. How was he supposed to decide? Choosing was impossible. To clear his mind, he centered himself, unleashing his inner energy to surge through his veins. Sharpening his focus to make the final call was no easy feat. This ability required grueling training and absolute mental discipline. Feeling a bit rusty after his long hiatus, he initiated the next phase. He summoned the candidates to enter one by one. This was the true purpose of his technique. He needed to peer into the souls of every knight, vying for his elite guard. Time after time, he sensed nothing but shadows lurking in their hearts. His mystic gaze stripped away their masks to reveal the truth. Forget polygraphs. He saw straight through their deception. The very hue of their emotions told him everything he needed to know. He wasn't looking for mindless drones. He sought warriors who would pledge their loyalty of their own free will. Then, the icy noblewoman stepped forward. Asia Purnell carried herself with a chilling elegance that defied her knightly status. Her record was suspiciously spotless. He wondered if some crucial secret was buried deep within her mysterious past. Still, if her secrets didn't threaten him, they weren't his concern. Out of everyone, she actually caught his interest. Asia was a lock, but he needed a second. He wasn't sure about the powerhouse from before, but then, a new face appeared. Entering last was Sina Galil. He couldn't wrap his head around how such a radiant, cheerful soul ended up here. This girl was a literal sunbeam, but her aura felt almost blindingly pure. He questioned her about her extensive travels abroad. Her resume was a chaotic list of different knightly orders. Flustered, she finally confessed the truth behind her constant moving. Turns out, she had a serious case of wanderlust, or maybe she was just getting kicked out of every squad she joined. Yet, he felt zero ill will from her. She passed the vibe check. He even sympathized with her desire to keep moving. Her job hopping was a sufficient explanation for him. With that, he wrapped up the session and promised to announce his picks. After a moment's thought, the choice was clear. Asia Purnell and Sina Galil were officially in. In a flash, his team was set. 2 deadly beauties had just joined his ranks. With Asia on his right and Sina on his left, even he was stunned. The vibe shifted instantly as one of them locked in. It was the perfect moment to see what they were truly made of. They wondered about his motives, but his answer was simple. He needed to witness their raw combat prowess firsthand. Regardless of their current level, he could evolve their strength. He just needed to gauge their hidden potential. Asia spoke up, wanting to know the best way to demonstrate their worth. She was more than ready for the challenge. Proving their power was only logical. A smirk played on his lips as he delivered the verdict. They would duel. Neither girl backed down. Since they seemed evenly matched, there was only one way to determine who came out on top. He threw down the gauntlet, questioning who was truly superior. He knew attacking their pride would ignite their fighting spirits. Losing wasn't an option for either of them. They began sizing each other up like predators. It was time for the show. The atmosphere grew heavy with killing intent. Tension crackled in the air, and honestly, he just wished he had some popcorn. While they debated the rules, they deferred to his judgment. He definitely lit a fire under them that wasn't going out. They were locked and loaded. He gave one final warning: no permanent damage. Sina chirped that she'd try to hold back. She promised to go easy on the experienced Asia, but Asia wasn't having it. She didn't need any handouts or pity. Asia's confidence was unshakable. Sina's erratic history was definitely paying off, but the chemistry between them was chaotic. He could tell they were about to go 100%. Sensing trouble, he reiterated that this was just a friendly spar. The signal was a single clap. The moment his hands met, a shockwave of pure power nearly knocked him off his feet. Seriously? He told them to chill, yet they went full beast mode. Despite the chaos, he didn't miss a single detail. He was dissecting their combat styles in real time. This data would be invaluable for the battles ahead. Their collision was a spectacle of violence. Their strikes were lethal. But he noticed something peculiar about Sina's rhythm. Sina wasn't relying on intuition. She was using raw, polished skill to react. They weren't noble ladies anymore, they were monsters. They tore across the field like apex predators. Sina lunged, her spear becoming a blur of deadly precision. That was her forte. Up close, a spear is a nightmare to deflect. But Asia wasn't done yet. In a heartbeat, she prepared a brutal counter. Asia delivered a savage kick, shattering Sina's momentum. Sina barked that bringing feet to a spear fight was straight-up cheating. Asia just scoffed, telling her to stop whining and keep up. It was clear as day. These two were playing for keeps. They were taking this spar way too far. As he scanned the wreckage, he realized they were about to level the place. Dust choked the air and blood stained the soil. Enough was enough. He roared for them to cease fire immediately. He'd seen more than enough. He gathered them, bluntly stating that both of them were still fundamentally flawed. They were speechless. He broke it down. Asia was a speed junkie with zero patience, while Sina's hesitation was a fatal weakness. Drawing from her own combat experience, Asa realized the rumors were true. He was the one who forged the second princess into a weapon. Was he really about to reveal his secret techniques to them? After all, the princess's sudden leap to mastery was no accident. That legendary reputation had set the barracks buzzing. He didn't deny it. They were his personal shields now, and they needed to be unbreakable. When he checked if they were following, the two were already whispering in shock, having never dreamed they'd receive such elite tutelage. Afraid of being a burden, they looked completely lost until his divine aura began to radiate with overwhelming intensity once again. He shrugged, mentioning his father was a total training nut, so grinding his own squad into shape was practically second nature. He boldly declared that as long as they stood by his side, they would evolve into true monsters of the blade. And just like that, the hellish regime began. He signaled them to move out, leading the confused knights straight into a classroom. They exchanged skeptical glances. Was he seriously planning to sharpen their lethal skills in a place meant for dusty books? Theory comes first, he smirked, telling them to lock in before pulling out his personal manual on the path of knighthood. If this method proved successful, he'd definitely turn this book into a bestseller. Sina, however, didn't seem to share his enthusiasm. She was struggling to even grasp the concept of aura distribution, and honestly, her interest was fading faster than her energy. Realizing his how-to guide might be a total flop at this rate, he cleared his throat and decided to pivot. He hadn't expected instant miracles from a book anyway. Instead, he told them to visualize the mana currently pooling within their bodies. He pointed out the specific nodes marked by dotted lines, the invisible highways where their inner power was supposed to flow. But he could see the problem clearly. In both of them, these vital energy channels were almost completely obstructed. Pushing aura through blocked pipes is rookie behavior, he warned. It wasn't just a waste of stamina, it was a disaster waiting to happen. It was straight up dangerous. Force those channels too hard, and your mana could backfire, sending your body into a total energy meltdown. Seeing the girls stiffen with nerves, he explained that before they could fight, they had to master the storm inside them. They needed to live and breathe mana, circulating it through every mundane task until it flowed as naturally as breathing. Once they mastered the basics, he promised to personally evolve their aura techniques. That vow alone set their competitive spirits ablaze. He straightened his robe with a sharp look, hoping they were ready, because the real specialized training was about to get personal. He started with Sina, calling out her sloppy concentration. She puffed out her chest, insisting her aura control was already top tier. He demonstrated a fist glowing with pure power, then challenged her to focus that same energy into her other hand and both legs simultaneously. She failed the moment she tried, exactly as he predicted. A real warrior doesn't just coat their whole body in aura, he lectured. Precision is everything. Burning aura too fast leads to an early grave. Sina gritted her teeth, desperately trying to mirror his technique. It was a total wash. The second she tried to multitask her energy across different limbs, her focus shattered like glass. Her senses just couldn't keep up with the demand. He reached out his hands, suggesting they try a more hands-on approach. He told her to ignore the logic and just focus on the rising heat from his touch to anchor her aura. The trick worked like a charm as Sina's hands ignited. She claimed she finally got it, though she was secretly distracted by how soft his hands were. Our hero was completely oblivious to the vibe, suddenly feeling an inexplicable chill as he told her to quit the nonsense. He barked at her to focus, and the moment she did, Sina's face lit up. The breakthrough was real. She finally understood the flow. He wondered if his explanation was a bit scuffed, but he shook it off. All that mattered was that the lesson had landed. Next was Asa. He brought up their last duel, specifically that reckless kick she threw the moment she got within his range. She winced, realizing how desperate it looked to rely on a brawl against someone with clearly superior martial techniques. He explained that such a move was a fatal error in high-level combat, especially for a master of the spear. True mastery requires a cold heart and zero rushing. Exhausted and sweating, Asa finally realized why he had put her through this hell. We see our hero literally lounging on her back as she struggled. He just calmly told her to keep her focus locked in. He pushed her to find that inner stillness, a state where the chaos of the world couldn't touch her while she moved. Suddenly, the girl bolted up, a wave of realization hitting her about just how much their prince was doing for them. Still, there was a literal pest buzzing around that she'd ignored before, but it was finally becoming too annoying to overlook. It looked like she'd have to squash it herself. The training had left her drained, yet under his guidance, she felt completely reborn. Our hero could see the transformation clearly. She was becoming significantly more dangerous with every passing minute. She hadn't expected the regime to be this brutal, but the proof was right there. A massive tree trunk, sliced clean through. Asa Pernal stood there in awe, questioning if an aristocrat like her even deserved such divine instruction from a master like him. Her lineage had collapsed into ruins. While scraping by in a secluded southern hamlet, a monster horde struck. Tragedy swept her entire family into the chaos. Those beasts eventually claimed her father's life. He made a final stand to buy them time, a sacrifice that cost him everything. Tears blurred Asa's vision. Soon, even the high-ranking allies who once praised her family turned cold. They were completely abandoned. To survive, she enlisted in a knightly order. Her raw martial genius allowed her to ignite her aura instantly. A royal decree summoned her to the capital. However, she was dumped into the bottom-tier 15th Squad. They were a bunch of low-level losers, led by a pathetic, incompetent commander. His aura was laughably weak. The man only held power through pure nepotism. He demanded private training sessions while casting predatory glares at Asa. Using the creepy excuse that she resembled his daughter, he invited her to dinner. She stormed out, venting her fury on a tree. She secretly fantasized about maiming him during their next encounter. Such dark thoughts were born from pure desperation. She applied for a royal bodyguard position, never expecting to actually land the high-stakes job. Despite the pressure, she couldn't complain. This role finally allowed her family to live in comfort. She just needed more savings, just enough to enroll her younger brother into the prestigious academy. In her eyes, every recent blessing was thanks to our hero, and she felt a burning need to repay his kindness. Meanwhile, Sena recalled how her peers in the Royal Guard questioned her habit of waking up before dawn. With the rookies still struggling to keep up, constant vigilance was a necessity. Sina was born into a mercenary bloodline. Her people had lived that way for centuries. She was raised in a wandering tribe that claimed no nation. That was their reality. Then, a veteran reminded her that the Great War had ended 30 years ago. Peace had lasted far too long. Mercenary contracts were vanishing. The man warned her that their way of life was destined to become a ghost story. He urged her to escape while she was still young. The older warriors would handle the stubborn elders who refused to change. He desperately wanted her to find a different path. It turned out that man was her own father. She told him if his mind was set, no one could stop him, so she vanished. Sina realized home felt hollow now. Even grueling midnight drills didn't faze her. The true blow landed later while she was far away. Her father had a fatal clash with a crooked lord. She called him a fool, yet she was cut from the same cloth. Like father, like daughter, she charged into conflicts without a second thought. Once, she even pulverized a man. She despised his plan to turn her peaceful villagers into bandits. She didn't regret breaking him for a second. If anything, she felt a sense of relief. Since then, she drifted between battlefields and high-risk zones. Eventually, she volunteered to guard the prince, who seemed genuinely kind. She felt like she'd finally hit the jackpot. Strangely, she loved this new life. Our hero felt almost ethereal, lacking the typical arrogance of the ruling class. Every time she glanced at him, a bizarre sensation washed over her. His hands looked so incredibly soft. She felt a sudden urge to hold them. It was a feeling she'd never experienced before. More importantly, she believed there was no possible way to fully repay the overwhelming generosity shown by His Majesty. Both girls reached the same verdict. The only way to show gratitude was to shield our hero for eternity. Even if our hero lacked martial prowess or magical mana, his intellectual growth was absolutely terrifying. He invented rare goods that saved the kingdom's treasury, and even mentored the second princess. His theories alone pushed her to become an aura master in record time. To them, he was a god-tier genius. Meanwhile, our 13-year-old hero was lazily sipping lemonade. He was firmly convinced that nothing beats the joy of doing absolutely nothing. If possible, he'd spend months perfecting the ultimate art of laziness. At that same moment, the emperor was hosting a summit. The nobles noted that our hero turns 14 next year. With his coming-of-age ceremony looming and his genius proven in every field, everyone argued the ceremony was the perfect excuse to grant him a distant territory. No one dared object. But the emperor saw through the facade. They wanted the hero exiled. The ceremony talk was just a convenient cover. A noble noted that our hero's reputation had spread far beyond local borders and into foreign empires. A count warned that people might mistake him for the next successor. Instantly, the emperor's face flushed deep red. With veins bulging, he couldn't process such blatant lies. How many times did he have to say it? The crown prince held the claim, but even though our hero dodged the throne, nobles wouldn't stop the clout-chasing rumors. Whispers crossed borders worse. The young elite were now standing our hero instead of the actual heir. As the vibes shifted, the emperor sensed a storm, knowing exactly where this political drama was headed. History was repeating its darkest era, but the emperor shut down the talk before it could escalate further. The court kept pushing, claiming this wasn't just gossip, it was a direct threat to the royal family's future. They preached about stability, but the emperor saw right through their desperate attempt to sideline our boy. They were dead set on exiling him. Faced with their petty ultimatum, the emperor let out a heavy sigh. Cornered, he agreed to consider their request only if they found a territory suitable for a royal. When our hero finally opened the letter, the true nature of that shady meeting became crystal clear. They weren't granting him land. They were packaging his banishment as a reward to get him out of sight. He let out a dry laugh before admitting he was hyped finally, a place to call his own. This was the goal. Why stay in a palace filled with toxic nobles acting like straight-up terrorists? He was literally glowing, knowing his own land beat staying boxed in with his brothers any day. Freedom was finally his, until Northern Phalia appeared on the map. It's a frozen wasteland where winter never dies, and one slip-up means becoming a permanent popsicle. Our hero realized farming was a no-go in that hellscape, and it was clear the nobles had rigged the game. But he didn't flinch, deciding they'd roll out exactly 1 month after his ceremony. That gave them 13 months to prep for the frost, a narrow window to gear up for survival. He dropped the act and told everyone straight, building a kingdom isn't child's play. This journey was only for the ride or dies. Anyone scared could quit. The real ones stepped forward. Keeping his hype low-key, he was stoked that the alchemist and the core squad were staying loyal. But Sinam looked stressed. She'd survived a year there before, which caught our hero totally off guard. He expected horror stories, but Sinam claimed the land wasn't even that dangerous in the traditional sense. It was just lethally cold, with 0 monsters to hunt, a fact that almost sent him spiraling. There was 0 upside. Hearing Sinam call the cold insane made him realize how cursed this posting was. Leaning back, he shrugged it off, acting like this was actually better than his worst-case scenario. He'd assumed they'd drop him in a dragon's nest or a monster hive to be roasted alive. Compared to that, snow was light work. His knights literally started sobbing, swearing to protect him forever. They definitely misread his mood. Later at the gate, Asia demanded the real tea from Sinam. Asia's gut told her something was off, and she knew our hero's sharp eyes hadn't missed it either. The unbearable cold was only half the story. The knights sent there weren't just guarding snow. They were meant to execute the mutated monsters tough enough to survive that Arctic hell. Sinam grinned. Asia didn't find the joke funny. She'd follow our hero anywhere, but this blatant betrayal stung. Discarded like trash, she couldn't believe it. But seeing the fire in our hero's eyes, she relaxed. He clearly had a master plan. She couldn't explain the vibe, but fear just didn't exist in his world. She bet it all on him. Still, she sent a secret dispatch back home just to be safe. Our hero finished the paperwork, satisfied that his logistics were finally locked in. But his mother, even if she stayed silent, her heart had to be breaking into pieces. He paced his room, regretting he'd banned the maids from telling her about his frozen exile. Her safety was his top priority once he left, especially after the hit on his sister. He needed high-tier gear, long-range comms, teleportation circles, and elite magic arrays. Magic scrolls and top-tier mages? The cost was high, but his brain was already calculating the win. He had to be surgical. For now, the entire manor focused on prepping for the Great Migration. After all, a brutal land was the perfect place for a professional to build an empire. Step 1. Build the magic foundation. He summoned Pian and his elite students to get to work. Unexpectedly, a familiar face stood there. He demanded absolute confidentiality first. Pian agreed instantly. The job was light work, our hero assured him. The catch? He needed it yesterday. Such frantic haste caught Pian off guard. He squinted at the blueprints. His jaw practically hit the floor in disbelief. Did you steal this? He bluffed. Our hero smirked, killing the doubt instantly. He'd personally redesigned a brain-boosting relic. It was a complete game-changer. He dubbed it an upgraded sage necklace, twice as potent as the original model. Production costs? Slashed by 90%. Pian couldn't fathom this prince's genius. Seeing Pian frozen, he issued a challenge. Could he build it or not? Pian stammered. With the right parts, anything is possible. He was still rattled. Flashing a calm grin, our hero slammed down a heavy sack of gold. This was hush money and material costs combined. A deal he couldn't refuse. Pian's glasses nearly shattered. Our hero casually requested some VIP perks later on. Every mage hit the floor, bowing low. Our hero thrived in the moment. Cash was the ultimate leash, making even the most stubborn knees bend instantly. He set a strict 30-day deadline. That gold was a brilliant investment, indeed. With them busy, he could focus. Days later, the mages delivered the prototype. Don't call it that, he groaned. The original name was Pure Cringe. 10 days? They'd perfected it already. Pian's craftsmanship was actually top tier. This prototype was flawless. Now, it was time to scale up production immediately. The mages prayed for a small order. He raised 5 fingers, grinning innocently. Make it 50, he chirped. The sleep-deprived mages felt their souls evaporate. Pian accepted the grind. With a radiant smile, our hero dismissed the mages. Unfair? They should try living 100 past lives first. Stage 2. Start. Inside the carriage, Asia's curiosity piqued. Why were they traveling so far out? This requires a personal touch, he replied. Some things couldn't be ordered in. Another shopping spree? Fate led them straight to the local slave market entrance. The words hit Asia like a truck. She screamed, "This is absolutely wrong." She'd completely misinterpreted his motives. Her mind spiraled into dark, tragic scenarios. She imagined him as a brutal tyrant, lashing workers and forcing back-breaking labor. Starvation and impossible quotas filled her head. Our hero waved his hands frantically. "I'm not a monster," he shouted. But the word slave usually meant hell. He expected screams and misery, but the facility was surprisingly spotless and quiet. Asia noted that sick merchandise loses value. The overseers were strictly professional here. This was a high-end bazaar for premium labor. Everything was meticulously maintained. A man approached with a slick grin. "Our inventory is vast and elite." He welcomed Errol warmly, introducing himself as Jan, the market's head manager. Our hero demanded formal respect. He was here as a high-paying client, after all. His notorious reputation preceded him. Jan's politeness was clearly a calculated move. Jan boasted about their legal compliance. Everything here was strictly by the books. They dealt in contracts, Jan claimed. Asia whispered the grim reality to Errol. Most were victims of crushing debt or insane taxes. Poverty was the cage. For some, this was the only alternative to starving. Jan opened the doors. No thugs allowed here. Asia suspected they'd scrubbed the place before their arrival. They entered Jan's office. The atmosphere suddenly grew sharp as they sat down. When Jan pressed for details, our hero didn't overthink it. He demanded every type available. "I want them all," he stated. Jan's jaw dropped when he requested a massive fleet of 150 souls. The merchant froze. Errol simply smirked, asking if the number was too intimidating to handle. Jan scrambled, noting he'd have to raid outside the capital. "Why so many?" he pried. Errol kept his cards close. No schemes, just one non-negotiable rule. Sort them by blood and bond. Groups of 5. Jan groaned at the logistics. Despite the hassle, whole families were common stock. He barked orders to his crew immediately. Mountains of parchment appeared. Errol was stunned to see even literacy was tracked, pure efficiency. "Can you ship them to my coordinates?" Errol asked, ready to pull the trigger. The moment Jan nodded, the prince signaled for the payment. Cold, hard currency. A heavy sack of gold hit the wood. Jan's pupils dilated with pure greed. "A true pleasure, Your Highness," he beamed. Errol was now his VIP. In any world, cash is king. Back in the carriage, the vibe shifted. Asia couldn't hold back. "Why such a massive army of workers all at once? I'm breathing life into a graveyard," he replied. "A barren wasteland needs a heartbeat. A lord of nothing is just a title." These people were his foundation. 50 artifacts weren't enough. He'd arm every family with magic and knowledge. Total transformation was the goal. Asia's eyes sparked with awe. Errol just tilted his head. What was the big deal? He wasn't about to freeze in some hole. This land would serve him, regardless of her shock. It was all about the ultimate lazy life. Total comfort required some early game grinding. Train the staff, then kick back. Now, he just had to wait for the results. Departure day loomed. Even for a transmigrator, leaving the nest feels heavy. As he dwelled on the goodbye, his mother slipped into the room, face etched with worry. She clung to him, desperate to petition the emperor. He hushed her letters, would bridge the gap. We have a whole year, Mom. Save the tears for later. He forced a gentle smile. His destination remained a ghost. He'd reveal the truth once he'd conquered the wild. Meanwhile, Princess Kanya was on a rampage. Training dummies shattered under her fury. Next, she screamed, demanding her knights strike to kill or face her wrath. The thought of him being exiled by those slimy nobles made her blood boil. She understood the politics, but she absolutely refused to forgive the outcome. The betrayal stung. He'd known for 6 months and said nothing. Silence felt like surrender. Little did she know, he kept quiet just to avoid this exact volcanic explosion. Her mana flared. Kanya wasn't just going to wave goodbye. Her aura surged violently. Rage and sorrow fused into raw power. It was the awakening Errol had anticipated. In a burst of light, the Empire's youngest swordmaster was born. History had shifted. A legendary breakthrough fueled by brotherly obsession. Errol felt the shockwave from afar. The sensation mirrored his past life's peak. Suddenly, the clock was ticking faster. Then came the speeches. The endless, mind-numbing ceremonies. Time slowed to a crawl. His coming-of-age gala was a sea of fake smiles and empty praise. Every word was a chore. Internally, he was counting down the seconds to freedom. It was suffocating. Far worse than his first birthday, when he could just play dead. Now, he was a glorified puppet, forced to wave at the very people who wanted him gone. The entire capital watched. To them, this wasn't a party, it was a send-off. Good riddance to the trouble prince, they whispered. Their hypocrisy was sickening. But seeing his mother's face kept him in check. One more month of this masquerade. Finally, those arrogant glares would be a memory. Since this was a divine goodbye, he decided to play the saint. The empress glided over, acknowledging his new status as a lord. She feigned sympathy, suggesting his departure must be breaking his mother's heart. Errol knew better. That white-haired viper never missed a chance to strike. With a formal bow, he countered that she was perfectly fine. Leaving the nest was inevitable sooner or later. He was just moving up the schedule. Hiding her skepticism behind an ornate fan, she claimed Zale would miss his presence. Supposedly, Errol's coaching turned Zale into a dance floor pro. She insisted Zale was truly thankful for the lessons. Now, she wanted to settle the debt. Errol immediately smelled a rat. Was this really a gesture of goodwill? Good fortune, this convenient, always had strings attached. Yet, she handed over a luxurious fox fur cloak. It was a specialty from his destination. In that instant, Errol saw the truth. The Empress had orchestrated everything. He already suspected it. Zale was way too proud to take help, let alone offer a thank you. But with her pulling the strings, reality bent to her will. The hidden hand behind the curtain was finally exposed. This gift was a slap in the face. Still, losing his cool now would play right into her hands. Swallowing his rage, he plastered on a grateful smile once more. He promised to thank his brother in person later, declaring that distance mattered little when shared blood bound them together. They'd back each other up from afar. Inside, Errol was screaming, barely resisting the urge to snap her neck. He prayed to the heavens he'd never have to fulfill that lie. May that day never dawn upon this world. Leaning against the railing, he felt the nightmare ending. Yet, a nagging sensation whispered that he'd overlooked a crucial detail. He glanced back to find the princess uncharacteristically silent. Surely, she was just fuming over his sudden, secret exit strategy. He planned a quick apology, but her eyes were fixed with terrifying resolve. She stood up and marched directly toward him. Her next move was a mystery, but it screamed total chaos. A heavy, bizarre tension filled the air. He could feel it in his bones. She was about to drop a massive bombshell. The Emperor tried to intervene, dismissing the moment as inappropriate. Kanya didn't even blink, completely ignoring his command. Driven by conviction, she announced her plan to follow Errol. He was absolutely floored. This was beyond his wildest theories. He hoped her mother would step in, but the woman looked just as blindsided. The Emperor's face hardened. This was no prank. Her request was pure insanity. Veins popped on the ruler's forehead in sheer fury. Yet, Errol knew once Kanya started, there was no stopping her. Among the royal heirs, Kanya's stubbornness was legendary. Telling her no only fueled her fire. Still, why him? Why now? The explanation hit like a physical blow. Kanya proclaimed herself Errol's future protector. Her father snapped at her to stop, regardless of her talent with a blade. She silenced him instantly. Skill wasn't the point. She was on the verge of reaching master rank. Shockwaves rippled through the room. A master at 19? Even the emperor looked shaken. Only the late emperor had reached such heights so young. Kanya, however, didn't care for history lessons. Snatching a sword from a guard, she challenged their doubt. Pure mana began to swirl around her frame. She ordered everyone to clear out. With one swift arc, she cleaved a distant table in two. Errol stood frozen. The proof was undeniable. Kanya wasn't bluffing. She looked her father dead in the eye, confirming this wasn't a whim she'd chosen her path. Marriage to a stranger wasn't in her cards. She'd rather brave the frontier to shield Errol from his enemies. She embraced the life of a guardian as her ultimate destiny. Seeing her resolve, Errol felt a lump in his throat. If she kept going, his stoic facade was going to crumble right in front of the court. She was throwing away her crown. It sounded insane, but the fallout would be devastatingly real. Was she serious? Her radiant smile was all the confirmation he needed. There was no going back now. What drove her to such extremes? Then, the realization hit him like a freight train. It was because of him. He was the catalyst. He stepped forward to intervene. But Kanya was already committing to her ultimate vow. Approaching him, she sank to one knee, ready to bind her fate to his. She pledged her life to his service, vowing to be his shield until her very last breath. Our MC recognized the weight instantly, a sacred knight's vow. Despite lacking official sanction, the air grew heavy with its significance. Her sister hadn't even earned her spurs yet. This entire stunt was completely unauthorized and incredibly dangerous. But with hundreds of eyes watching, a swordmaster's word becomes law. You don't just ignore a pledge like that. The entire hall stood paralyzed, sensing the binding magic. Was this her endgame all along? Behind the mask of a protective sister lay a cold, calculating ambition. She was carving her own path to power. Faces of pure shock haunted our hero. Some guests looked like they'd seen a ghost, others simply collapsed. One fire was out, but a greater blaze was rising. To his surprise, hot tears began blurring his vision. A dark realization hit him. His birthday was a magnet for tragedy, a day he never wanted to see again. Time marched on relentlessly. The air hummed with the sound of packing as families prepared for a final goodbye. His mother stood like a statue of calm. She had already steeled her heart for this inevitable moment. He tried to offer comfort, promising a swift return, but her eyes spoke of a deep, maternal agony. She teased him about his childhood tears, making him wonder if he really was that much of a softie. But there was no room for nostalgia. She practically shoved him toward his journey, desperate for him to find a cure. Seeing his fragile state, he attempted to soothe her fears. He started to explain his mysterious destination, but she stopped him with a gentle smile. The secret he'd guarded so carefully was already hers. A mother's intuition is a terrifying thing. Ignoring the danger, she only whispered a plea for his survival. That nearly broke him. Parting is a bitter pill, even when the hope of homecoming still flickers. The iron-rimmed wheels began to turn, carving a path toward the Empire's desolate, frozen northern frontier. He was sent to conquer a wasteland, where the earth shatters steel. Staring out, he felt the chill of betrayal. Was this a death sentence? Fine. Even if they dropped him in hell, he'd find a way to freeze it over. He checked his warming artifacts, drawing a curious look from his sister. She couldn't fathom the expensive mana drain. Inside the cozy carriage, she sat comfortably in a light dress. Upon closer inspection, he noticed something incredible. She was radiating mana like a natural furnace, a technique he had never even mentioned to her. It was pure, raw instinct. Her latent genius was honestly starting to terrify him. She acted as if it were normal. He warned her immediately to keep that terrifying talent under wraps. Jealousy in this world can be lethal. He then asked if she regretted leaving her life behind for him. Her temper flared instantly. She pinched his cheeks, demanding to know if he was already bored of her company. He meant her status. The princess had abandoned her royal life just to serve as his personal guardian in the north. It took a full day of desperate pleading with the emperor, yet she still refused to let him go alone. While twisting his face, she insisted this was her golden ticket. He had no clue what she was planning. Then it dawned on her he was totally out of the loop. If she had stayed at the capital, she would have been auctioned off in a political marriage this year. At 19, her time had run out. He realized why she was so desperate to flee. Like a caged bird, she craved the wild, open sky. He could relate to that thirst for autonomy. For the princess, this journey was her first breath of true air. He wondered who the unlucky suitor was. She scoffed, vowing to reject the man before even glancing at his portrait. That poor guy probably dodged a literal bullet. A marriage with her would have been a beautiful nightmare. She joked that living with her would have driven any man to beg for the sweet release of death. He didn't know whether to pity the groom or thank him. Finally, the carriage halted at his new domain. A legion of soldiers, hundreds of workers, and his personal circle of alchemists were ready to begin. This frozen rock would become his paradise. His first move? Fortifying the borders against the unknown. He assigned the defense to Aisia and Sina. As for the princess, He had other plans for her chaos. Giving her command was too risky. One bad mood, and she'd level the entire training grounds for fun. She wasn't built for paperwork anyway, preferring to lounge in the snow. It was time to meet the locals. His new subjects were 10,000 hardy souls scattered across 12.5 desolate, windswept villages. Step 1. Winning over the hunters and gatherers who had survived these brutal lands for generations. A century of isolation had bled this land dry. The population was cratering, and poverty was just the beginning. It was a ghost province, forgotten by time. Even the imperial palace had stopped collecting taxes, abandoning it as a lost cause. Doubting the previous lord ever drew breath here, our protagonist cracked open the dusty ledgers to find the truth. The records were a nightmare of corruption. That man hadn't just failed, he'd drowned the territory in mountains of unpayable debt. He thought he'd seen rock bottom, but his predecessor was a masterclass in how to absolutely ruin a kingdom. Spreading the map wide, the weight of leadership settled in. He'd have to carry this entire region on his back. The people were few, but the timber was endless. Perhaps lumber, or better yet, paper was the key to their salvation. Paper was pure gold in this world. With his other ventures already pulling in steady profit, this was a calculated gamble. It was time for some boots-on-the-ground recon. If the previous lord was a complete clown, someone else was holding things together. He needed to find the territory's secret backbone. Immediately, he summoned every single village elder for a mandatory face-to-face meeting. No excuses, no exceptions. Just as he sat back, the massive doors suddenly slammed open. In walked the giants of Ice Valley behemoths, capable of tearing a wolf limb from limb with their bare hands. After the formalities, our hero laid out his vision. He wasn't just another noble. He was here to truly rule. He wanted their trust, but he saw the skepticism in their eyes. To them, he was just a pampered kid, playing lord. Who could blame them? But then, a young face caught his eye, an anomaly among the sea of grizzled elders. The youth spoke up, explaining his father, the former chief, had passed away, leaving the heavy burden of leadership to him. He had stepped up to lead. Of course, our hero already knew this from his late-night research sessions. He didn't push it. His only goal was making sure they knew exactly who was calling the shots now. "We have business to settle," he announced. "But first, let's talk strategy over a hot meal. You look exhausted." He knew the vibe. To these commoners, eating with a noble was basically a death sentence for their appetite. Watching them squirm was low-key entertaining. He wasn't hungry either, but seeing their terrified expressions was worth the awkward dinner. "Why the long faces?" he teased. The tension was thick enough to cut with a sword, and honestly, he felt it too. He'd prepped endlessly for this. Nearby, his sister was struggling to hide her laughter at his serious lord persona. She'd never seen him try this hard to look intimidating. Suddenly, one elder lifted a tray and froze in pure shock. "Sorry, it's not a feast," he remarked casually. "It's humble, but it's the best I can offer you right now." They bowed in frantic gratitude, but he knew they were just terrified enough to agree with whatever he said. It wasn't fancy, the treasury was still bone dry. But the moment one man bit into the meat, his eyes widened. It was salted. In this desolate land, salt was more precious than gold, a true luxury for the common folk. This was a delicacy. By sharing this humble meal, he was signaling that he wasn't just their lord, he was one of them. He stood with his people, not above them. Ready to lead, he finally dropped the act and spoke from the heart. "The previous lord was a disaster for you," he stated firmly. "When a leader checks out, the people always pay the price." Life had been a brutal struggle, but he made one thing clear. The era of neglect was officially over today. The decade of forced labor they'd endured? Illegal. He was tearing up the old, oppressive rules right then and there. Hunting barely kept them alive. His new directives might sound insane at first, but they were the only way to survive. "Trust me," he asked simply, "even if I haven't earned it yet." As he stood, the room fell into a heavy silence. His speech was electric. The elders looked at him as if a literal savior had descended from the heavens to help. "Chill with the hero worship," he muttered, uncomfortable. He didn't want to be a god. He just needed them to follow his lead. Total cooperation was the goal. If they followed his plan, he'd break the chains of poverty and liberate their people forever. No more starving in the woods. His first order? Welcome the newcomers he'd brought, every single one of them. These former slaves were now free citizens. They needed homes and peace, a chance to finally live as real families again. The literate among them would become his personal staff. The chiefs agreed, but a massive social barrier still stood in the way. Would the villagers truly accept outcasts? Even without the chains, the stigma of being a slave was a mountain to climb. They were still untouchables in the people's eyes. But our hero just smirked. He wasn't going into this without a master plan. With one subtle flick of his hand, the message was sent. Instantly, the village heads folded, swearing their absolute loyalty. Walking out, the elders were stunned. Was this what a real lord looked like? They had never seen anything like him. The village elder noted our protagonist was a complete outlier. Previous lords treated this land with total indifference. To the nobility, this place was a dumping ground. The predecessor attempted reforms, but his stupidity caused a total disaster. The locals paid the price in blood. Now, a fresh face had arrived, a boy barely hitting adulthood. The elder feared the worst. What was this kid's endgame? He prayed this wouldn't be another clown show, just like the last failure. But gazing into the hero's eyes, he sensed a terrifying, sharp intelligence. Hope was still a luxury. For now, the villagers could only observe and place their bets on him. Our hero analyzed the documents while resting his head on Sina's lap. Pure relaxation, masking a calculating mind. He played the spoiled brat for a second, but the data was grim. The original census was 10,000. Reality check. Only 9,600 remained. Even counting the outskirts, they barely hit 9,800. Sina explained that a mass exodus is standard during a messy transition of power. People flee. But where did they vanish? Birth rates were plummeting, and the suffocating poverty was the obvious culprit. He had 450,000 gold plus startup funds. That war chest could theoretically last 50 years. Yet, those noble snakes sent him here to drown. They wanted him swallowed by this backwater swamp. A target was on his back. If the crops failed, he was toast. Sina noted the last lord went broke. Trying to force farming was a death sentence. The previous ruler was a moron. Survival meant hunting. That was their only lifeline. But was that it? No. It was time to pull out the secret weapon. The first major play for this dying hellhole? Infrastructure. The roads were crumbling, death traps for travelers. Maintenance was non-existent, total chaos. So, our hero finally pulled the trigger on his grand engineering project. The proposal dropped like a bombshell. The new lord was actually hiring locals and paying real wages. He promised top-tier pay. If the lord was footing the entire bill, why wouldn't they jump at the chance? Construction kicked off instantly. Looking at the blueprints, the scale of the ambition was staggering. But our hero didn't blink. Even if the timeline stretched, every single worker would receive their fair share. The crowd erupted in joy. Gratitude flooded the streets. Money was the ultimate leverage, and he loved seeing progress. That was the law of the world. Work for your rewards. Once the pathways were paved, smooth. Travel became a breeze. This paved the way for Phase 2, the second massive regional overhaul. Establishing a powerhouse trading firm. A skeptic argued this land wasn't built for commerce. Big mistake. Our hero silenced him with a cold stare and a mountain of cash. Action over talk, always. Step 1. Dominate the trade of daily essentials. By controlling the supply chain, he would drag this territory forward. Trade was just the beginning. Now, he turned his sights to his boldest reform yet. He questioned Damon. Was his vision even possible? Damon scanned the blueprints and realized the hero wanted to manufacture paper. Paper existed, but it was garbage. Rough, low-grade sheets made from primitive fiber pressing techniques. Even that subpar tech was imported. In the Empire, it was an overpriced mystery no one could solve. It was a luxury for the 1%. Only the elite and the Imperial Library used it. Commoners used parchment. Parchment was the only option. Damon knew mass-producing paper would be an absolute goldmine. The catch? The secret technique was lost. Did our hero actually possess a revolutionary new method? The protagonist scoffed. Did Damon really think he'd show up empty-handed? When the topic of rivals came up, he dismissed them instantly. They weren't just making paper, they were disrupting the entire industry. Any objections? Damon examined the complex machinery specs. The design was flawless, bordering on genius. But there was a snag. Manufacturing was the hurdle. They were alchemists, experts in potions, not mechanical engineering or heavy metal work. Local blacksmiths were amateurs compared to this. They couldn't forge precision parts like these. But if they could recruit dwarves from the capital, the impossible might become a reality. The hero's interest was piqued. Dwarven craftsmen were scattered throughout the empire, taking elite contracts. Their reputation was legendary. They could forge the impossible. He made his move immediately. This was exactly why he hoarded his wealth. But dealing with dwarves wasn't just about gold. You couldn't just buy them off. While they loved riches, their ironclad pride was the real obstacle. These craftsmen only take jobs that flex their mastery, so our protagonist had to tuck his gold away for now. The warning was clear. If they vibe check a request and hate it, they will hard pass regardless of the bag or status. Our hero couldn't wrap his head around it. Was their artisan pride really that massive? Did no one value the grind and knowledge from a legendary commission over a quick paycheck? He figured they would regret it once the work dried up. Damon offered to pitch the blueprints to some dwarf contacts, and our hero's eyes lit up. Damon was certain those complex designs would hook their interest instantly. Fast forward a few days to a dwarven forge, where a master dwarf was barking orders to stop slacking. The faster they crushed the work, the easier life would be. Suddenly, an apprentice announced a new letter had arrived. He scoffed, assuming it was another annoying imperial demand, and told them to schedule a reply for next year. But the sender was that alchemist from 10 years ago. The dwarf's memory sparked. He knew exactly who it was. He couldn't fathom why the man was reaching out now, but then he went ghost white and fell silent. He dumped his tools on the servant and bolted, shouting that he needed an emergency meeting with the others. The servant stood there stunned. Was that piece of paper really that deep? The chief's expression had flipped instantly. What were those words? No one understood why he would summon everyone when they were already drowning in orders. Some complained that if it was so urgent, he should just go alone. He snapped back that this was absolutely massive. A hand-drawn blueprint had arrived. The sender wanted them to forge top-tier gear over in Pahelia. One dwarf snorted, calling the request a joke and mocking the chief for calling a whole meeting for one job. The chief admitted he thought it was cap too until he actually laid eyes on those technical specs. It was a revolutionary papermaking design. He told them to remember the disaster from 5 years ago. That Easterner who promised high-quality paper. Everyone remembered that failure because, in the end, they couldn't even touch his standards. Their craftsmanship had been met with nothing but pure humiliation. Some were ready to retire their hammers in shame. The chief held the scroll high. This was their redemption arc. The tech they couldn't reach 5 years ago was right here, and that same legendary man was asking for help. He exhaled, a grin spreading, and declared that if no one else was down, he would head to Pahelia solo. The room exploded. They told him to cut the nonsense. He was already swamped with work. He just laughed. He claimed his disciples could hold down the fort, silencing the room before the real arguing started. Everyone wanted a piece of the action. If this was a business trip, the whole squad was volunteering. Finally, the gnome shouted for silence, pointing out that the forge would literally die if they all left. Only half the crew could go. As they debated, the worker serving that dwarf stepped in to check the chaos. He witnessed the unthinkable, dwarves brawling. When words fail, these guys settle everything with their fists. That was the iron law of the forge. The worker noped out, slowly closing the door on the violence. Meanwhile, our hero sat back, realizing a reply would take at least 5 days to arrive. What now? The answer was simple: ultimate laziness. He was a professional at doing absolutely nothing. Since there was zero work, it was time for a much-needed break. Still, shouldn't he be productive? He had waited ages for a chance to rot in peace. Then, a piercing screech shattered the silence. He wondered when his griffin got so loud, then saw the creature streaking across the sky at a terrifying height. He couldn't believe his eyes. Even a pro could barely fly that high, and there was zero chance. A baby griffin could hit those speeds alone. It was being pushed past its limits by the princess. She was literally yeeting the griffin into the sky to teach it. Our hero demanded to know what she had done. Had the poor bird messed up? The princess just shrugged and said she was only training it. He failed to see how that counted as training. We then flash back to see how this mess started. With the duty handover in progress, the princess was the only one with a totally empty schedule. Her routine was a loop of eating, sword grinding, and sleeping, over and over every single day. For a girl who can't sit still, the boredom was lethal. Then she spotted the griffin chilling in the garden. That is when the bird's nightmare began. She wanted a fast mount, so she forced it into a brutal regime. Our MC realized teaching his sis common sense was more vital than blade skills. Suddenly, a thought hit him. Could this be the perfect bonding moment? With the palace quiet and his schedule finally clear, he pondered the possibility. How do normal siblings actually hang out? In his first life, he was an only child. Past lives offered family, but those connections were ice cold. His peak sibling goal back then was just mutually ghosting one another, until the bitter end. Even as a legendary pro, he was completely clueless about brotherly duties now. Releasing the griffin, he finally granted the beast its freedom. As it soared away, he turned his gaze toward his sister. Vowing to be a top-tier brother this time, he proposed a game. Round 1, a classic match of high-stakes chess, but turns out, using brain cells was pure agony for her. Before long, she rage-flipped the entire board in frustration. Screaming her hatred for the game, she forced him to forfeit. Honestly, he wasn't exactly feeling it either, but up north, fun was a rare loot drop, and chess killed the monotony. He calmed her down instantly. He offered a rematch, suggesting she use that high-tier artifact he gifted to boost her strategic mindset. Deep down, he knew she was cooked. His mastery was light years ahead of any mortal player. Still, was holding back this much even necessary? Suddenly, the monostone fractured under the sheer mental pressure. Her expression shifted to pure rage. Drawing her blade, she sliced that chessboard into 4 jagged pieces. Our MC spiraled into hopelessness. Chess was his only hope to actually buff her intelligence stats. Playing it cool like nothing happened, the princess declared chess officially banned from their hangout sessions. At a total loss, he asked about her usual hobbies. Her response was chillingly simple: non-stop combat training. He was stunned. Did she never experience burnout? Even he couldn't find a moment of peace lately. How do you bond over that? But as his stomach roared, a brilliant new plan sparked in his mind. A cooking collab. The idea terrified her. She'd never touched a stove. She begged to skip the kitchen duty. He stood firm, explaining that elite knights must master survival cooking. In his expert opinion, knights weren't just bodyguards, they were frontline hunters. And here was the brutal reality check. Expeditions could drag on for weeks. Did she plan on starving? Without basic culinary knowledge, she might literally poison herself. He lectured her that cooking is an essential survival skill for every warrior. That's why she needed this lesson. Though looking miserable, she finally caved. He assured her everything was fine. He'd guide her, despite the bizarre irony of a younger brother schooling his older sister in the kitchen. Donning a chef's apron, our MC announced the main course, a hearty, rustic meat stew. It was a straightforward recipe requiring minimal ingredients, a classic staple for any traveling adventurer. The ultimate soldier's meal, easy, filling, and iconic. He prayed they'd survive the prep without a disaster. Miraculously, as she chopped the greens, he noticed her blade work was unexpectedly surgical and precise. Mentoring her through every phase, they finally reached the end game. Her first culinary creation was served. He gave it a passing grade, promising that with more XP, she could survive any treacherous journey ahead. She'd be self-sufficient. Our hero finally felt his mission to entertain the princess was mission accomplished. After the meal, he dreamed of a short nap. But before he could even stand up, a frantic servant burst in with a high-priority alert, shattering his strict "do not disturb" command. Breaking that protocol meant something major was going down. He demanded the status report immediately. "A goblin delegation has arrived," the servant gasped. Our MC was floored. Then came the kicker. The goblins had threatened a bloodbath if the hero didn't show his face pronto. He couldn't believe the audacity. How did the dwarves mobilize this quickly? Regardless, their arrival meant the alliance was on. Time to execute. Laziness wasn't an option anymore. Despite the early arrival, he had to welcome these guests with proper dignity. He stepped out to greet them, but the dwarves stormed right into his personal space, barking questions. "Are you the genius behind this blueprint?" Asia, witnessing the disrespect, stepped in to check their attitude. She demanded an immediate apology. The dwarf sensed her immense power level, yet her hostility only intensified. He gave a gruff apology. After all, human hierarchy meant nothing to dwarves. They despised those hollow formalities. Polite, noble speech wasn't in their nature. Our MC intervened, reminding everyone these were VIP allies. He realized the clock was ticking on this spat. If it dragged on, Asia might actually delete them from existence. Then came the truth bomb. Yes, he was the mastermind behind the blueprint. Naturally, the dwarves weren't buying the hype. They demanded receipts. If this was a human prank, they wanted the real architect out right now. Our boy stood his ground, but the dwarves couldn't fathom a scrawny kid designing something so god-tier. He looked too fragile to even lift a tool. Fed up, our hero let Asia handle the muscle so he could actually talk business. Even the butlers had to intervene to kill the standoff. Once things chilled, the dwarves gave him one final vibe check on that design. Low on energy after dumping 7 pieces of proof, he questioned why they'd pulled up so incredibly fast. Had he known, he would have rolled out the red carpet, or at least let them catch a breath first. But the dwarves cut the fluff. Did he want the machine built, or what? Our MC gave a firm yes. That was the whole point. Humans lacked the crack skills for this. The dwarf smirked, knowing these components were far beyond mere human capabilities. Was this guy just flexing his race? Our hero didn't miss a beat and fired back. That a human brain is plenty for peak ideas. After all, he shamelessly glazed himself as a certified genius. He claimed full credit for the design, flexing his high IQ without a single hint of modesty. A true legend, he even teased a massive backlog of secret inventions. Surprisingly, the dwarf actually bought the hype. Seeing how eccentric this kid was, his yap session actually worked. The dwarf instantly calmed his energy. Ego stroking was the ultimate cheat code. From the jump, it was clear the deal was basically locked in. Our MC tried to explain the vision, but the dwarf intercepted. Since they showed up in real life, they were already all in. The contract was a go. Forget the bag. The actual payment wasn't even on their radar yet. They'd take any terms offered. These guys only grind on hype projects, and since this machine was fire, they needed a look at his other blueprints too. Keeping the momentum, our hero teased his secret stash of designs. He had a whole portfolio waiting. The dwarves went silent, finally admitting they were desperate for a peek right now. Seeing that pure hype in their eyes, he immediately whipped out another legendary drawing. They lunged for the goods, but our hero snatched it back with a cold, "not so fast." The dwarf was itching to grab that scroll, but our MC put him on pause. Step 1. Build the current design. Finish the first one. Then and only then would he unlock the rest of the secret collection. The dwarf slammed the table in frustration. Our hero just smirked, playing it cool as he dropped the facts. reminding him that a genius's trust is earned, not given. The dwarf barked back, promising a speedrun build. Their eyes were literally blazing with passion. Our MC was vibing. The blueprint had worked its magic perfectly. He almost leaked the whole plan, but pivoted. Now, those drawings were the ultimate bait to keep them grinding. Knowing this would double their work speed, he low-key praised his own deviousness. That was his dark side shining. The plan was working flawlessly. Soon enough, the dwarves were pulling up to his place constantly. Their sleep-deprived faces said it all. Every time they cleared a quest, our MC handed them a new project. He wondered if they even knew what sleep was, since they kept crashing his room at all hours, ignoring boundaries, hygiene, and logic. Even with the build done, their weird, hyper-fixated energy was off the charts. In under 10 days, the first papermaking beast was born. Finally, he held the fruits of their labor. He felt like a legend holding that crisp, clean paper. The MC was definitely feeling himself for this invention, not to mention the dwarves' insane conveyor work. This wasn't your basic, mid-tier paper. While others dried sheets one by one like NPCs, his machine mass-produced pure, snowy white perfection in batches. Pure luck that their territory was stacked with the perfect timber to launch a full-scale paper empire. They asked for his review, but our MC hit them with the "I need a few more machines." That really triggered the dwarf, but the clock was ticking. This paper was about to dominate every shelf. Once the trade routes were locked, the cash would start flowing. Naturally, everyone wanted a piece of the pie. Seeking a sales pro, his uncle was the first to pull up. Dispatched by his mom, this was family business. The uncle asked what the product was, and our hero revealed something that absolutely broke his brain. This was about to break the economy. High-tier quality at low-tier prices. The competition was going to be livid. Market hunger for paper was exploding, driving prices sky-high due to the grueling manual production process. Supplies evaporated as costs spiked, reaching a point where even his uncle couldn't secure a single sheet. Now a luxury for the elite, he warned that any dip in quality would ignite a massive scandal. But our protagonist wasn't sweating it. This revolutionary product would leave customers with absolutely zero room for complaints. In a league of its own, his uncle realized that providing premium quality without the insane markup was a total power move. It crushed the competition. His uncle's eyes gleamed as he immediately began cooking up a master sales strategy. With such an affordable price tag, they could finally reach territories where paper was once just a distant dream. Recognizing a natural-born hustler he could trust, Errol knew it was finally time to rake in the gold. Meanwhile, our hero saw his vision taking shape as the dwarves finished crafting his custom-designed machinery. But barely a day after completion, the dwarves were already returning? It felt way too soon. Didn't they want to feast or celebrate their success? The dwarves' response was blunt and professional. They had a mountain of work waiting. Though apprentices were managing, the masters needed to return to their forge. However, they made one thing clear. If another exciting project popped up, they'd be back in a heartbeat. They vanished instantly, leaving our hero blinking in confusion, as he'd expected at least a small victory celebration. Their craftsmanship was essential, but now it was time for the main event, launching the paper. The second it hit city shelves, people were absolutely stunned, as the ink stayed crisp without a single smudge. The durability was insane, and the quality was top tier, quickly catching the attention of every princess and queen. Rumors swirled about the young lord of Fahelia's miracle paper and the massive roadworks he was spearheading. Seeing a young prodigy transform a wasteland was shocking, and naturally, the king's curiosity was finally piqued. Noticing the sudden upgrade in royal documents, the king questioned his butler about this mysterious new parchment. The butler didn't hesitate, confirming that this revolutionary paper was both more affordable and vastly superior. It outclassed every rival, and when the king demanded the source, the butler revealed the truth immediately. This was the Lord of Fahelia's work, and the king beamed with pride, realizing his son was the mastermind. To top it off, Fahelia was finally ready to pay taxes, leaving the king absolutely ecstatic. He struggled to believe Fahelia had evolved so quickly, but while the king celebrated, tensions were rising elsewhere. Back at his estate, our protagonist lay in bed, sensing that his name was on everyone's lips. Honestly, he didn't care about the fame, he was just hyped that he could finally afford unlimited honey. Meanwhile, the queen and her son were sipping the very tea Errol had gifted, with the prince certain Fahelia was doomed. That comment caught the queen off guard, but she masked her shock as her mind spiraled into dark territory. She was plotting to erase Errol and his mother permanently, emitting a cold aura before she excused herself. She reminded him that, as the future emperor, he needed a legendary blade that matched his royal status. He had to embody imperial power, but the moment he left, the queen's composure shattered, and she swept the table clean. She was consumed by thoughts of that cursed paper, while Errol's name rang in her ears like a constant threat. Boiling with pure hatred, She snatched her teacup and hurled it violently against the floor. We soon learn her true identity, Alia Pratt, whose family held an absolute monopoly over the entire paper industry. They only faced two international rivals, starting with the Eastern Maritime Empire, until the war crushed that competition. Their imports were banned, and the second rival was easily bought off, leaving Alia livid over their wasted investments. They'd built an elite monopoly, and now this brat was disrupting everything. How dare Errol challenge her authority? Realizing she couldn't afford to wait, the queen grabbed her quill and began drafting a lethal response. Errol wasn't wasting a second, returning to the slave market exactly 6 months after his massive investment there. Now a high-ranking VIP, the merchants treated him with total respect as he arrived to secure more manpower. When asked for his requirements, our hero requested elite warriors who could survive the most brutal, freezing climates. That was his specific target, leaving the merchant completely baffled by the unusual request. He couldn't guess Errol's endgame, but our hero simply stated they were needed for heavy-duty protection. With massive roadworks and paper production exploding, his current forces were simply spread way too thin. These outcasts were now Phalia's new shield. Errol knew his lordship title carried the weight of a count, granting him massive authority. His rank allowed for a 50,000-strong army. When asked for his requirements, Errol simply raised 5 fingers. The merchant guessed 500, but Errol corrected him he wanted 5,000. All the man saw were piles of gold. Meanwhile, our protagonist just stood there, grinning while shaking off the shock. The merchant agreed to the massive order, proving once more that money is the ultimate cheat code in this world. After roaming the city, he inspected the dwarven forged blades. The craftsmanship was straight-up legendary. By then, the massive crowd had gathered to witness their new master. Lord Errol gazed at his new subjects, praying they possessed the strength needed. He needed them to guard his land. Finally, with his tasks done, it was time for some rest. Under the cover of darkness, shady figures began creeping toward our hero's paper mill. Their mission? Sabotage. Deleting the factory's machines would absolutely wreck the local economy. They gambled on zero security, dreaming of the massive payout that would let them retire forever. It was the ultimate heist. Scouting ahead, they only spotted 2 lone guards. Easy pickings. They synchronized their strikes, taking the guards out in total silence. They stormed inside, but the room was hollow. Suddenly, elite knights emerged from the shadows. Trapped, they were baffled how such a large force had stayed hidden. Errol appeared as the chaos peaked. The intruders instantly started begging for their lives. They claimed they were just pawns, but Errol felt zero pity for those threatening his people. He ordered them hauled off for interrogation, demanding they spill every dirty secret they held. Errol walked away, leaving the cleanup to his men. He despised violence, but some lines can't be crossed. Threatening his inner circle was a death sentence. He'd never compromise when his loved ones were at risk. He'd suffered enough. By sunrise, the interrogators had begun breaking the prisoners. Justice was served swiftly. Their sentence? Lifelong slavery within the territory they tried to ruin. Unfortunately, the low-level grunts knew nothing. Errol realized he needed a smarter strategy. On the bright side, the economy was booming, and the budget was finally secure. Finances were no longer a headache. Now, it was time for the main event. He needed to test the goblin's teleportation circle, despite the astronomical price tag. Every enchanted piece was top tier, making it worth the risk. He refused to overthink the potential glitches. He was going home, no matter what. He slotted the magic stone, completing the ancient device. With the destination set, he summoned Kanya, though she looked totally sketched out by the machine. Regret started kicking in, but Errol's calm aura helped settle her nerves. He promised a safe, lightning-fast trip. Yet, her gut was still screaming in protest. Kanya hesitated, so Errol grabbed her hand and pulled her straight into the shimmering portal. He told her to just watch and focus. She nodded, even though she was low-key terrified. Errol promised the only side effect was mild vertigo. Once she braced herself, the journey began. They vanished. Kanya gripped him so hard he could barely breathe. It was a bumpy ride, but a second later, they landed safely back home. Childhood memories rushed back. Overwhelmed, Errol literally kissed the ground in relief. No more freezing winters for him. Nanny rushed over, beaming with pride after activating the magic stone. Lady Phalia was waiting. Errol suggested they split up, which immediately annoyed his sister. Duty called. He was laser-focused on his mother, wondering if she'd been okay. He burst through the doors and embraced his mother, who was visibly shook to see him back. She was already updated. Her uncle had sent letters detailing every major event in the duchy. Errol was stunned his uncle found time to write, considering how swamped the man was. The man was likely starving himself from overwork. Still, Errol wanted to share his own version. His mother agreed, and they strolled outside. Errol began describing the infinite snow and those mysterious white rabbits. He shared plenty, but strategically left out one terrifying detail: Those bunnies were massive 3-meter-tall titans. He briefed her on Philia's beasts and tribes, carefully picking the stories that would make her heart happy. Then, footsteps echoed. It was the one person he truly dreaded seeing, the queen. She played off his return as a total surprise, but Errol knew better. What kind of scheme was she plotting? Intercepting his mother, he quickly asked about His Majesty, adding that right away, the queen acted like everything was chill, maintaining that cold, royal status quo. She dropped hints about the tea she'd heard. His fief was thriving. Errol didn't blink, owning that success instantly. He credited his groundbreaking invention, casually mentioning that the entire empire's population was obsessed with his new drops. He was low-key trolling to make her squirm. Her royal ego definitely stung. The boy she once ghosted had just wrecked her family's monopoly. But Errol wasn't even breaking a sweat. His paper quality was simply on another level. Suddenly, she pivoted, feigning concern over some bandit rumors. Errol just offered a polite thanks, assuring her everything was locked down. With that, the queen finally dipped. But first, she dropped a subtle threat to watch his back. Mom definitely noticed the Empress's salty vibe. Errol shrugged it off as typical family drama. Deep down, he was ready to face her challenge head-on. Eventually, with time ticking away, Errol had to head back. He bid his mother a final, heartfelt farewell. Then he teased Kanya about her progress, earning a smack to the head. Honestly, he'd actually been quite worried. The maid's report had sent his brain into overdrive, cooking up wild scenarios. He really was a massive overthinker. As the portal flickered out, they knew the trip was over. Fast forward a few days later, at Philia Manor, a fresh challenge emerged. They desperately needed a mage, and for several critical reasons. First, a mage could reliably stabilize the teleportation circle, a must-have for Lord Flax's land. Plus, magic-boosted crops, and accelerated tree growth for the paper business. Talk about the ultimate OP support. If monsters or enemies raided, a mage would be the ultimate game-changer. But the real question remained, where could they find such a cracked magician? Errol hit the books, but came up completely empty-handed. He was stuck without a lead. But surrender isn't his style. Since nobles always have casters on payroll, he had to recruit one. But mages are pricey. Hiring one costs a fortune, and this territory is massive. He'd need an entire squad. Plus, one major catch. This whole operation was basically about shielding the paper factory. Warriors are tanky, but what if the next raid involves high-level magic? Grunts are great, but magic is a necessity. The verdict? Philia was hunting for a pro-mage. Now, all he needed was to send an expensive request to the magic tower. Errol felt confident. Some freelance mage would bite. Even a low-level caster would suffice. He was dead certain. He could grind them into a top-tier wizard. Hyped, he started distributing flyers. People noticed the ads immediately. Realizing this was the same territory, making that premium paper, many started considering the job opening. Enter Bala, a total weirdo who lunged at a flyer, declaring she absolutely needed the gig for the free food and housing. Within days, the application pile was way bigger than expected. Errol wanted the whole squad, but interviews came first. He even planned to test their power personally, to ensure none of them would trigger a betrayal arc later on. He needed proof they were legit. So, he handed over the files for a total application deep dive. Day arrived. After scouring the resumes, 12 elite mages finally made the cut. They got the "you're hired" notice, sparking instant joy. Errol then began assigning their specific duties and teaching them magic. Mostly, they'd be tending the land, while considering their personal specializations as well. But first, he needed a captain. He asked any level 4 mages to step forward. 2 stepped up. Errol immediately favored the girl, not for her looks, but for her raw talent. He then thanked the girl destined to be his personal mage. Her name was Dia Lecky. Don't think Errol was just making excuses, though. He had another secret reason for choosing her. During the interview, something about Dia caught his eye. With a resume that stacked, she could have landed a prestigious gig. So why come north? She simply wanted to serve the prince. That actually caught Errol off guard. Most care about the bag, not pure devotion. Was serving him her real motive? Errol scanned her soul and found zero traces of ill intent. She was legit. Since that was the case, he gladly accepted her. After the briefing, duties and perks were finalized. Then Errol opened a door, revealing a room packed with books. The Mage Tower's books were total steals, but securing their cooperation? That was the real grind. The mages were hyped. Errol realized these were the tower's low-tier rejects, basically desperate for a win. Without this chance, they were destined for obscurity. No wonder they looked so thirsty for progress. This many opportunities? Unexpected. Errol told them he'd be watching, so they better stay locked in. His true motive was different. He planned to use them as fuel for his own magical evolution. The basics were mastered. Now, he needed elite-level insights. Gathering brilliant minds was the ultimate move. Smart allies meant a smoother future, worth the hustle. As they stepped out, the work began. Errol tasked Daya with forest rebirth. The timber trade was booming, but the trees were suffering. Could the mages fix it? Say less. Suddenly, ancient-looking trees surged violently from the earth. Errol froze. This wasn't just basic magic, it was a high-level ritual in motion. They were nurturing life, not forcing it. Could they spawn trees from nothing? Not quite. Overloading the soil would kill it. The land needed a month of recovery to stay fertile. Even in a fantasy world, nature has rules. Errol pivoted to the next crisis, feeding his people. Hunting wouldn't save Fahelia forever. They needed a massive harvest to survive the long haul. A mage asked if she should just boost one field. Errol's vision? Level up 12 villages. He backed off slightly, no need to rush. Just help the locals prep the perfect environment. The mages crunched the numbers. Mana conservation was key, but the math finally checked out. Errol introduced his specialized gear. The first play? Block the frost with a massive mana barrier. Trap the sunlight and keep it cozy. The tech worked flawlessly, lighting up Errol's face. Phase 1 complete. Now, rinse and repeat across every village so nobody goes hungry. Assignments dropped. 2 mages to R&D, 3 to fortify the palace walls and facilities. That left Daya. Errol named her his personal escort, his shadow and primary right hand. Since he had to keep his magic low-key, Daya would be his magical proxy in public. Step 1. Hit the books. Daya's eyes sparkled as she swore to grind until she succeeded. Her intense energy caught Errol off guard. Then it hit him she was reading his work. Tonight's, his theories were too complex. Why did a non-knight want a book like that? Daya got it from a friend. She argued that mage and knight mana control shared souls. Different methods, same core. For casters, the system wasn't actually that foreign to them. It matched Errol's research perfectly. To Daya, this book was her literal holy grail. She'd traveled across the world just to serve the author. Errol was low-key shook. His ideas had actually touched her soul. Plus, she was obsessed with the rice he served. A mix of high ideals and simple cravings, Errol felt a wave of genuine relief. Back in the library, Errol devoured scrolls until the world's mechanics finally started making sense. Time for a live test. He watched Daya's flow, memorizing how she channeled her power. Within seconds, he mimicked her spell perfectly. He was officially becoming a pro at this. But no ego-careless casting is a death wish. He reset to the basics. Shortly after, Errol rolled into Ernest. Objective: the dwarf iron factory. His bodyguard was already throwing shade. She remembered their past disrespect. Errol calmed her, but the suffocating forge heat hit them. Ben, a 15-year veteran, greeted them. Looking at him, Errol felt a pang of pity. Living in a literal oven for a decade? Brutal. Ben led them to the master's chamber. The master was already waiting, letter in hand. Errol apologized for the sudden arrival. The dwarf was notoriously impatient. No small talk, he just poured wine and signaled business. Stop yapping and get to it, the dwarf barked. Errol didn't hesitate for a second. He dropped the bomb. A contract to hire half the dwarf population. The answer? Immediate refusal. The dwarf scoffed, calling Errol a delusional drunk. But Errol wasn't backing down yet. Errol demanded half the dwarven workforce. The chief slammed his fist down, shouting for a valid reason. Why move to a frozen wasteland? Errol had the ultimate bait. Forget gold, he had something better. The hook was Damascus steel and lost tech. The dwarf couldn't believe Errol mastered alchemy this deeply. He recalled a teacher saying dwarves would travel worlds just to acquire such legendary, rare metals. These master smiths lived for legendary crafts. So, Errol dropped a bombshell. He knew the steel secret. He offered blueprints that defied logic. The dwarf stood frozen, wondering if this man was a genius. Errol played it cool. He possessed the theory, while they owned the craft. A match made in heaven. That line hooked them. They dove straight into a heated contract negotiation that shook the entire room. After hours of aggressive haggling, they settled on a 5-year pact. The chief finally agreed to terms. He promised to rally his kin within a month. Meanwhile, Kanya was busy spilling tea with guards, complaining about her brother. She claimed she would go stir-crazy. She stormed straight toward his private chambers. She burst in to find Daria spoon-feeding Errol while using magic to hoist him like a doll. Mana flared, seating them instantly. Kanya stood there, jaw-dropping at the sheer absurdity of the lazy scene. Her brother reached peak laziness. The kicker? He casually announced it was time for his magical bath. Kanya and the guards swarmed him, demanding an explanation. Daria just blinked like a confused puppy. Errol started sweating as his sister's glare intensified. He tried to ask what the big deal was. Kanya slammed him onto the table. Why are you acting like a spoiled brat relying on magic? Errol defended Daria's loyalty, but Kanya snapped back. Her service wasn't the issue, it was his pathetic effort. Can you even walk anymore? She barked. Errol scurried to the bathroom, leaving Kanya slumped in exasperation. Errol insisted Daria didn't mind the work. But the guards weren't having it, stepping in to intervene. They warned Daria that serving him this way in public would spark nasty rumors and social backlash. Errol finally felt the weight of their words, yet he still tried to laugh it off. Kanya wasn't joking. She banned magic use and restricted all contact with Daria. The games were over. Daria's face drained of all color. She looked like she'd been hit by a truck, trembling hard. Was she fired? Errol realized he had messed up big time. His lifestyle was a total wreck. He had become a vegetable, letting Daria cater to every whim. Kanya doubled down on the lecture, but Daria dropped a truth bomb. She was performing magical therapy. She was stimulating his muscles to prevent atrophy. Kanya still hated it, but Daria stood her ground. The mage refused to apologize. Errol realized Kanya had accidentally bruised the pride of a high-level wizard. Another girl chimed in, questioning Daria's obsessive loyalty. Why was she so desperate to be his shadow? Errol tried to intervene, but he was invisible. Kanya demanded cold, hard proof of Daria's magical worth. Challenge accepted. Daria summoned a mountain of paperwork and organized the entire mess in a heartbeat. Kanya pushed further, making it a cooking duel. Daria served a gourmet feast, leaving everyone speechless. Errol was low-key impressed. He slipped out, only to be cornered by guards who suspected hidden motives. 2 days ago, the palace security had been trashed. Kanya was convinced Daria was the prime suspect. The newly installed wards were completely fried. Someone had intentionally sabotaged the entire security system. Errol didn't buy it. The guards mentioned a suspicious letter from the Magic Tower demanding her return. Errol scoffed. Was all this drama over one piece of mail? Had they even confronted her yet? They had, but Daria didn't even flinch. Her lack of reaction made her even more of a mystery. The girls trusted her, but couldn't wrap their heads around her devotion. What was her true endgame? Errol joked it was his irresistible charm. Deep down, he sensed zero malice, just a strange vibe. Kanya was simply terrified of mages. Errol understood her trauma, but needed time to solve this puzzle. It was time for a real talk. He had to reveal the full truth. Meanwhile, Daria sat in her room next door. The space was eerily empty and bare. It looked like she had just moved in, yet despite the walls, Daria was beaming with joy. She beamed with pure joy, buzzing about finally clearing Kanya's grueling trial. To her, this victory meant everything. Talent beat wealth any day. But Errol cut in, noting that Kanya looked low-key fuming right now. Securing a personal mage felt intentional. Daria sensed this move linked back to that devastating black mage raid. Kanya didn't need to say a word. The whole Magic Tower was already gossiping about the incident. Errol stood stunned. He offered to smooth things over with Kanya, but Daria instantly shut that down. She'd crushed the test and vowed to prove her value alone. Still, Errol couldn't wrap his head around it. Why was she so desperate to serve him when they were basically total strangers? It's a whole saga, Daria sighed, recounting how the Magic Tower originally scouted her as a young child. After a plague leveled her village, she wandered the wastes until the tower snatched her up for survival. They sensed her raw mana potential. She mastered spells quickly, but struggled with literally everything else. Eventually, she plateaued and ended up as a glorified janitor. Errol found that totally impossible to believe. How could a pro like her be treated like trash? Daria explained that just 2 years prior, she was barely level 1, then now she's a tier 4 beast. Keep listening, she urged him. Tower theory made mana control a nightmare until she stumbled upon Errol's legendary manuscript. Errol nearly fell over. This girl reached the top tiers just by self-studying his own secret notes? Was she a legit prodigy? Someone who evolved in total silence without a single soul noticing? That's when Daria confessed her deep admiration for her master. She then dropped another bombshell. The second she hit level 4, she ghosted the tower, but there was a major catch. Her old master tried to chain her down, but that guy was pure trash. Finding Errol became her mission. She survived hellish trials before finally spotting his recruitment post. He was her literal savior. Becoming a true mage brought her pure bliss. But when Errol questioned her further, she knew a long-winded sob story wouldn't win Kanya over. She needed to prove her worth through action. Explaining it all was too draining. Errol exited, promising her secret was safe with him. But once night hit, he summoned a court mage and spilled every single detail. The man confirmed it. Daria was once treated like garbage, and her so-called mentor was a villain. She was a self-taught beast who escaped the tower without even flinching at their threats. That piqued Errol's curiosity. The mage explained the tower's savage penalty system for deserters. They'd literally drain half your soul. The tower was wild, but Errol's mind was made up. He vowed to fix this by sunrise. Stepping outside, he found Daria already facing off against Kanya. Or maybe Kanya pulled the trigger first. This was the final showdown. Daria was going all in on magic. Errol scrambled for backup, but the other girls stayed back. Kanya's word was law here. Daria struck first. Instantly, the field exploded with the colliding auras of arrow and spell. But the outcome was bizarre. Both their attacks veered off, striking a seemingly empty void. The truth emerged. Her dispel charm had sniped a rat hiding under the palace walls. It was Master Dai, the creep stalker. Errol realized this was the villain Daya absolutely loathed. The mage flashed a decree, demanding Daya's immediate return to the magic tower. Daya scoffed at the audacity. He ignored her for years, and now he wants the master title? The man started trash-talking, calling her a nuisance. Errol wasn't having any of it. "Watch your mouth," Errol snapped. Suddenly, the mage lunged, grabbing Daya with a sneer. He mocked Errol's status, promising Daya a world of pain. But then, the atmosphere shifted. Errol slapped the man's hand away, declaring Daya was officially under his personal contract. The mage froze. Without tower approval, she wasn't legally allowed to serve anyone. Annoyed, Errol revealed he'd already bypassed them and secured the tower's green light ages ago. "Get out before I lose my cool," Errol warned. The mage responded by smashing glowing orbs. Massive golems rose from the smoke. He shrieked that Daya was his, and the tower would back him. Whenever trouble brewed, Errol just casually scratched his ear. Seeing his signal, Kanya commanded the girls to demolish the golems and punish that creep. The mage braced for the golem behind Errol to strike, but Dia was faster. With a flick of her wrist, she reduced the beast to dust instantly. Zero hesitation, she targeted her former mentor, locking him within a swirling vortex. Trapped in the eye of her storm, the mage knew he was cooked. Panicked, he burned an emergency teleport scroll and vanished into thin air. The girls fumed, absolutely livid that they let that trash slip through their fingers. Errol just shrugged it off, telling them to chill. Dia immediately spiraled into apologies for the mess, but her master silenced her with a gentle nod. They'd actually sensed that shady teacher's presence ages ago, giving Dia the perfect stage to finally flex her true magical prowess. Kanya's sharp edge softened as she comforted her new ally. Meanwhile, miles away, the mage crashed into the freezing heart of a snow-drenched forest. He was still fuming, unable to process Dia's betrayal. Suddenly, he caught a shadow on a branch and unleashed a lethal burst of magic at the intruder. But he missed his mark. Our hero had tracked him down personally, ready to deliver justice with a single, concentrated bolt of fire. The projectile hit dead center. With the threat extinguished, peace returned, and Dia resumed her role faithfully by the protagonist's side. Kanya kept a tight leash on magic usage, banning any shady business. Dia, however, was still low-key shocked she wasn't a walking disaster anymore. Errol shut down her doubts instantly, promising she was no burden. Touched, Dia vowed to dedicate her life to serving him with absolute loyalty. It never crossed Errol's mind that he'd earned such ride-or-die respect from a powerful mage far beyond the palace walls. Under a crystal-clear sky, Errol decided it was time to truly test his limits. The sheer pressure of his mana was terrifying. The intensity nearly sparked a massive forest fire. He glared into the tree line, signaling that his real move was about to start. Childhood trauma resurfaced in his mind. He'd always lived under a microscope, and the queen was still obsessively breathing down his neck. Now that she was targeting his mother, he was done playing nice. He initiated his master plan, first weaving a massive protective barrier. He soared above the queen's estate, raining down fireballs like a god of destruction. Total panic erupted as the mansion burned. Errol was having a blast, darting through the chaos invisible while stunning anyone in his way. He wasn't just attacking, he was straight up trolling them. He even helped himself to the royal treasury for a bit. While he was vibing, the king received a cryptic, urgent letter. Inside were the specific song lyrics our hero had composed, as a parting gift for the queen's eyes only. She went pale and hit the floor, convinced the king had been assassinated, but the guards quickly confirmed he was perfectly fine. Next morning, the king called an emergency summit of every mage. They estimated the attacker was at least level 6. Errol just stood there, wearing a smirk. Before them sat a glowing blue crate overflowing with fresh supplies. The villagers had absolutely crushed their tasks. Starvation was officially off the table. A man approached our hero, hauling a massive harvest of corn over his shoulder. It was a literal miracle to see such growth in these barren lands. He proudly presented 2 varieties of top-tier grain. Both samples were massive, double the standard size. The credit went entirely to Prince Errol, who took it with a humble smile. Visualizing the mage's hard work, he diverted the praise, insisting it belonged to everyone who had grinded overtime to make this happen. Our hero signaled the mages. Looking over their progress, a satisfied grin spread across Errol's face as his plans bore fruit. The queen's lineage was finally out of his hair. He didn't give a damn his mini-empire was thriving, and he hoped this peace would last 50 years. Post-Great War, only 3 superpowers remained relevant: the Urnesia Empire and the Merman Empire. Then there was the Damonal Kingdom. Out of the big 3, Damonal was the underdog, barely clinging to its status. They survived on pure luck rather than military might. Cut to the heart of Demenel, where the chancellor was hosting a lavish banquet. A monocle-wearing noble raised a golden toast to the night. Standing right by the chancellor's side was a man with striking green hair. He hyped up a small token of his affection and signaled a maid to bring the gift forward immediately. He urged her to hurry and present the box to the chancellor. She carefully opened it, revealing a single, mysterious jar. The chancellor smiled as he inspected the prize. This was a legendary elixir, exclusively sourced from the Ernesia kingdom. Rubbing it on your scalp could literally resurrect dead hair follicles. It was the ultimate, holy grail cure for baldness. The green-haired man practically begged him to take it. Patting his shoulder, the chancellor knew this high-tier loot didn't come cheap. He cut to the chase, asking for the man's price. The guy flashed a sly grin, acting like he wanted nothing in return. But he did mention his son was heading to the front lines next year. The chancellor's grin widened, catching the unspoken request. Message received. The banquet continued in high spirits, with elite gossip flowing as freely as the drinks under the warm lights. The golden champagne was top tier. Lately, luxury goods from the Ernesia kingdom had become the ultimate status symbol here. Demanel was obsessed with these imports, even though it was all black market smuggling. Meanwhile, over at the Demanel conference hall, King Hezin Luxuritania was losing it, slamming papers onto his desk and demanding answers. His advisors sat in dead silence, eyes glued to the floor. Ernesia's contraband was flooding the borders. Even the king's own banquets were now dominated by foreign imports. Hezin Luxuritania buried his face in his hands, terrified of what was coming next. Duke Elgigin tried to play it cool, but the subordinates were just standing there, utterly clueless. Didn't they get it? The king warned that their debt was about to spiral out of control. Hazen looked up, heartbroken. The economic balance was finally starting to tip against them. Everyone was obsessed with the new hype. Meanwhile, Errol was literally chilling on a mountain of gold. As the king sweated, the Merman Empire was already protesting Ernesia's suspicious paper production. How could they ever catch up? Duke Elgigin stepped forward, his eyes burning with resolve. No more waiting, he declared. The king rose, his hand signaling a point of no return. Their enemy was a titan, but the duke wasn't intimidated by Ernesia's massive shadow. They didn't have to fight this alone. He raised his hands, calling for a secret gathering. With a cold stare, the duke announced an alliance destined to burn the Ernesia kingdom down. The letters were sent. Soon, the duke met with hooded figures in a dimly lit room. This was a high-stakes meeting, hidden deep within the palace's most secure dungeon. Candlelight flickered as the duke welcomed Grand Duke Gong and the calculated Count Marin. It had been years since they met. They weren't there for small talk, they wanted results. The leaders unmasked. Sajapan might be small, but their army was a force of nature. The coalition was almost complete, but one chair remained hauntingly empty at the table. Gong glared at the seat. Sun Cook was late, but his greed would eventually bring him crawling. Since they were about to butcher Ernesia, it was time to put all their cards on the table. Let's start the deal, Gong muttered. Elgigin leaned in, his presence dominating the room. Ernesia's explosive economic growth was a threat they could no longer choose to ignore. Gong agreed, noting that this was just one of the many nightmares they were facing. A scarred man asked the real question. Could they actually win? Failure meant certain death. Elgigin stared him down. That's exactly why we're doing this together. No nation is invincible. A single state can't survive a coalition. War would force Ernesia to stop their production entirely. The duke pictured Errol's face. Rumor had it the young prince was the mastermind behind everything. A genius at 8, a savior by 14. He had revived a dying land with sheer intellect. Even if the stories were hype, letting him grow up would be a fatal mistake. Ernesia's reign would never end. Elgigin's fist tightened until his knuckles went pale. They couldn't wait. It was time to stop being afraid and go take the boy's head. Gong and the count smirked. The Merman Duke spoke up, his voice dripping with malice. Marin slammed his palm down. These rulers had been waiting decades for a shot at the crown. The Duke of Dominiel clasped his hands and flashed a smile that could freeze blood. The deal was sealed. Now, it was time to finalize the blueprints for their invasion. Over in the Ernesia palace, the king sat brooding. He knew the vultures were gathering. Their secret treaty was transparent. Their intentions were screaming from across the border. The king rubbed his eyes and grabbed a scroll. It was time to get ready for war. A storm was coming, a conflict so massive it would make the old wars look like child's play. But Ernesia was ready. Their taxes and military strength were at an all-time high. "We won't lose," the king roared, ordering his messengers to summon the entire army. Meanwhile, a boy relaxed on the grass. A girl in a purple scarf watched him closely. He wondered if he'd gone too far, but he was confident his plan was foolproof. "What's wrong?" Maya asked. Errol, now 15, looked at her with a heavy gaze. "I don't like this," he whispered, clutching his head. He needed to find his sister immediately. He needed to gear up. The tension was peak. That greedy alliance was absolutely seething. They couldn't stand this kid's massive profits. Their only choice? Team up and crush him. Goon and Count Gelding were completely shook. The Merman Duke always hated Errol's guts, and the Count of Seijapan was already looking for a fight. He pledged his entire legion. These three vultures locked eyes, sharing a single, dark ambition to destroy him. Strangers until now, they finally found common ground, taking down the rising prodigy before he became unstoppable. Errol just smirked at the news. The enemy was banding together, forcing the Ernisia Empire into full battle mode. Bathed in window light, our hero sat tall. He could literally sense the killing intent closing in on him. Nearby, a blonde girl scanned the news. The three-state alliance was officially making headline news. Merman was once a close ally, but Kanya was already plotting a brutal preemptive strike against them. Since they're being sus, why not hit them first? Kanya asked. Errol actually agreed with her logic. But there is a catch. Without receipts, Ernisia would just look like the villain for attacking first. Errol noted those dukes weren't noobs. They wouldn't leave a single shred of evidence behind for them to find. Knowing about the pact at all was a miracle. Errol leaned back, narrowing his gaze in deep thought. He knew this was coming, just 5 years too early. Honestly, greedy leaders are the same in every world. Lives are just numbers to them. That's why the army stays busy. Errol massaged his temples in pure frustration. Annoyed by the constant bloodlust, Kanya started to worry if the stress was finally getting to him. Surrounded by documents, Errol studied her. Before the chaos broke loose, he needed to know her next move. She looked totally confused. As she sat, a subtle, ethereal light began to radiate from her body. He assumed she'd retreat to the palace, especially since the king was blowing up her inbox with worry. Errol acted casual, while bunny-eared Kanya sat nearby. Apparently, Dad didn't care much about his son's safety. The king refused to let his precious daughter touch a battlefield. Errol raised a hand to emphasize the point. Look, I'm not saying run away, Errol clarified, but she needed to stay safe until the storm passed. In a crisis, she was royalty first, knight second. Kanya just crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed by his plan. She shut that down instantly, leaving Errol stunned. This is serious business, not some game, he snapped. This is a life-or-death scenario. Are you certain? He pressed. Kanya just gave him a confident, knowing grin. Her smile grew wider. There was no way she was hiding behind a fancy title while he fought. Her vow was to protect Errol. Why would she flee now? Errol stared at her like she was a stranger. He was shook. Wiping away fake tears with his handkerchief, he gasped at her sudden growth. Our little princess is finally all grown up. Kanya just rolled her eyes at his dramatic behavior. Fine. I'll tell Dad you're staying, Errol yielded. Kanya thanked him. She wasn't backing down for anyone. Despite the effort, the king finally read the update. Meanwhile, in another part of the castle, inside Fahelia's lounge, a raven-haired beauty enjoyed a drink, while two other girls relaxed nearby. The white-haired girl sighed heavily, noting that war is a beast. She then turned her gaze toward Saine. Ever seen real combat? She asked. Saine blushed, admitting she'd survived 2 brutal campaigns in the past. She'd walked the front lines, but those were minor skirmishes compared to the looming apocalypse ahead. She reminisced about home while her companion sat there, lost in her own deep thoughts. Saine heard her little brother just enrolled in the academy this year. She needed to see him. Sipping her drink, she hoped he'd understand why she had to leave. Saine grinned, knowing this was no holiday. Time was rapidly running out for everyone involved. They toasted their mugs, drinking like it was their last night. Tomorrow wasn't guaranteed for any of them. Saine noticed the purple-eyed Shara had cleared the table. I was literally dying of hunger, Shara whined. The blonde girl snapped back. That beer isn't exactly a meal replacement for a hungry warrior. Books overflowed everywhere. Errol sifted through his research, clutching a green tome while staring at the maps. He played it cool with Kanya, but his data confirmed Ernisia was destined for war very soon. It's happening within the year. Preparation starts now. Errol began moving his war pieces across the map. Calculating the odds, he gave the alliance a measly 30% chance. His veteran instincts from past lives estimated a massive force of 600 to 700,000 troops. On the map, 2 pawns represented Ernisia's defense strategy, matching them with another 600,000. A decisive win was impossible to call. Errol flicked the pawns over and lined up mismatched pieces. If things went south, he'd have to play dirty. He tapped his chin thoughtfully. Even in a total meltdown, he could survive as long as his fortress and his own life remained secure. Errol sank into his chair and exhaled. His main mission? Just living his best life on his own terms. Flashing a cocky grin, he decided this wild young lord simply needed to outlast the coming storm of war. 2 lone pieces remained. Errol's first move, beef up the military and crush the alliance's momentum. Before they even crossed his border, he'd lock his territory down so tight not even a rat could sneak in. Boots crunched through the fresh snow as Errol kicked open the heavy doors to Akin's chaotic workshop. A stray wrench whistled past his ear, a clear sign that Akin was having a legendary meltdown today. Errol casually waved while an axe thudded into the wood behind him. "Welcome to Philia," he joked. He eventually asked if Akin's setup was sufficient. The silver-haired smith grunted a confirmation. High-tier tools and insane, top-shelf facilities. Errol then pushed his luck and asked why he was so triggered. Akin glared, shoving a heavy hammer toward his nose. The local smiths, he spat, were absolute trash and couldn't follow instructions. Pure fury burned in his eyes. He hadn't slept for 48 hours. Errol gently noted that normal humans couldn't match a master's speed. Akin slumped onto a stump, anvil at his back. He did confess to cracking a secret regarding the billet. The simplicity of the formula had actually shocked him. Errol cheered but cautioned him about the Gramovka mix. Akin clutched his temples as Errol finally cut to the chase. He needed a massive haul of blades, and he needed them now. Akin countered that if the blueprints were basic, they might pull it off. Then he asked for the quantity. Errol leaned close, whispering a number into his ear. Akin's jaw hit the floor while Errol just smirked. He stood by the exit, arms wide as if welcoming the chaos. He sprinted out just as another projectile whizzed by. Behind him, Akin screamed that the kid was absolutely delusional. The enraged smith had to be tackled by an apprentice. "Take a breath, master," the man pleaded. But Akin was livid. Gear for 20,000 troops? Did Errol think this was some kind of magic trick? Errol wiped cold sweat from his brow. If he wasn't careful, Akin might actually end him one of these days. Still, he knew the old man would deliver. Cut to 3 suited men, featuring a leader draped in white fur. Furcoat thought their paths would never cross again, greeting his special VIP, Prince Errol. Errol just beamed at him, confessing he hadn't planned on a return trip either. The agent was floored when the prince's letter first arrived, and scrambled to ask about the head count. Smirking, Errol promised this would be his most insane order yet. The traitor rubbed his hands together greedily, sweat beading on his skin, promising to handle whatever the prince needed. He knew Errol was no ordinary client. Errol flashed 5 fingers. He needed 50,000 men, a 10-fold increase. "Can you do it or not?" Errol challenged. The man began dripping sweat, stuttering over his own words. The traitor stood there, panting like a cornered animal. Errol pushed harder. "What's the holdup? Are you out of stock?" Offended, the traitor explained that demand among the nobility had skyrocketed. Everyone was buying bodies for the war, and thousands had already been shipped out. Errol tossed out a half-hearted apology for the sudden pressure, then asked if he truly intended to deploy 50,000. The traitor noted they wouldn't all be Errol's personal units. Like before, his family would be sweeping up the stock. 50,000 was just the baseline for his tactical projections. Errol remained ice-cold beside the panicking traitor. After a tense moment of silence, the man finally caved. "I hear you, Lord Errol." Errol recalled the man's history. He was a guy who only worshipped the almighty dollar. Nevertheless, more boots on the ground meant better odds, and Errol was dead certain that the snake was just angling for a bigger payout. Staring him down, Errol warned him that his time was precious. The traitor's eyes sparkled as he agreed, claiming efficiency was the soul of business. Errol ordered the delivery to his gates, right away, demanding to know the time frame for all 50,000. The traitor crunched the numbers and promised 5 days. Errol signed off, promising to show up in 5 days to pick them up himself. The traitor blanched, clearly not expecting a personal visit. The man offered a personal delivery, but Errol brushed it off. He'd handle the pickup at the gate. A smirk played on Errol's lips. The grind was real. He only had 5 days to prep everything. It was time to take charge. Errol leaned into the carriage, meeting Tanya's gaze with a steady look. She wanted to join him, but hesitation flickered in her eyes when he mentioned leaving once more. 5 more days? Errol stood tall, keeping a perfect poker face by the door. Rule number 1. Keep her in the dark. He needed a distraction before she started asking questions. Tanya yielded for now, but promised a future interrogation. To pivot, Errol suggested a tour of the capital. The offer stunned her. As a princess living under the shadow of war, she was basically a shut-in. Trapped in the palace, she'd spent years yearning for freedom. He could almost see the lonely girl gazing out. That image stuck as Tanya asked about the tour, her voice trembling. Errol tried to play it cool. He suggested a quick stroll since they were bored. But for her, those casual words hit like a truck. Tanya finally relented, reaching out her hand. "Just this once," she teased, her mood suddenly brightening. Errol helped her down, soaking in the chaos. The marketplace was electric, with vendors screaming their best deals. They navigated the swarm of people as Tanya took it all in. This wasn't the city she'd imagined. "This is just the edge of town," Errol grinned. "Better keep up, sis, or you'll get lost." Snack time. Errol trailed behind, looking absolutely disgusted while clutching a literal fried lizard on a stick. One bite of the street meat and Tanya was hooked. Pure deliciousness. Soon, They drifted past a grand fountain. Where to now? She asked. Errol shrugged, giving her the reins. The world is your oyster. Pick a spot. A massive crowd caught Tanya's attention, swarming around a shop with a very flashy sign out front. While Errol crushed some ice cream, Tanya pointed toward the shop, her eyes going wide as she read. Exclusive gear by the silver-haired sage? Tanya gasped. She couldn't believe his legendary creations were being sold here. Errol nearly choked on his treat. Seeing that name in public was his worst nightmare. This is a joke. Seriously? Who cooked up that cringe sage title? There's no way people actually believe this is his work. He was dying of secondhand embarrassment. As Tanya bolted toward the entrance, Errol tried to stage an intervention. He tried to redirect her, but she was already eyeing a weapon shop. Errol struggled to keep up. The shop was a literal forest of steel. Immediately, a shady salesman swooped in with a greasy grin. In the market for a masterpiece? The man chirped. Tanya leaned in, mesmerized by the rows of blades. He claimed they were authentic, dwarven steel, top-tier quality. And hey, lucky for them, everything was 10% off. Errol scanned the stock, his expression going cold. That's cap. Selling fake dwarven blades is a death sentence. The salesman panicked, doubling down on his lies. Tanya stood her ground, hands on her hips, waiting for answers. Suspecting a scam, Errol pointed at a blade. Hey sis, why don't you give this thing a little mana? Don't overdo it, he warned. Tanya gripped the hilt, skeptical, and flooded the metal with her energy. A purple glow surged, then crack! The blade shattered like glass, leaving the salesman trembling in pure terror. Cheap knockoffs can't handle real aura, Errol smirked. The seller looked like he was about to faint. The man stuttered about a mistake, but Errol wasn't buying it. Should we ask the real dwarves nearby? Cornered and desperate, the man folded instantly. He started begging for mercy, desperate to keep this a secret. Errol snatched a sleek dagger from the shelf. I'll take this as a hush money fee. Deal? Tanya was lost, but the seller tried to protest. That was his mistake. Errol shot him a terrifying glare. With a menacing, toothy grin, Errol whispered, "Got a problem?" The man turned pale and frantically shook his head. The seller thanked Errol for his mercy as they exited into the street. Errol held the blade up like a prize. Tanya was skeptical, but Errol knew this one was the real deal. No frills, just a genuine blade. He held it out to her. "A gift for you," he said. Tanya froze, her eyes searching his. Was he actually serious? She held the blade to the sky, glowing with joy. "Thank you," she stammered, holding it close. "You're the only one who truly sees me," she whispered. Errol just smiled, walking by her side. Errol leans back, watching her glow with the kind of pure joy usually reserved for a priceless gown. His sister is truly one of a kind, blushing over a gift this bizarre. Days later, Errol finally reaches the fortress. He returns with 50,000 followers in tow. Kanya leans over, whispering that he's totally overdoing it. With a smirk, he tells her to envision herself commanding 20,000 warriors straight into the heat of battle. Immediately, Kanya sees it. Herself in gleaming steel, sword drawn, with a massive legion at her back. The vision hits home, and she nods with newfound fire. Meanwhile, Asai, Sena, and Daya are just vibing at the gate. Asai suggests a formal welcome. Sena scratches her head, joking that the prince has been MIA for way too long. But as the massive gates swing open, their jaws hit the floor. Sena and Asai stand there, completely paralyzed. Their expressions are pure chaos while Daya remains unbothered. Simultaneously, they shout out the exact same question. There stands Errol, grinning like a madman, with a literal sea of laughing people flooding in behind him. He beams, announcing his grand return along with 50,000 brand new citizens for the kingdom. The massive crowd surges forward, Asai facepalms, groaning that she totally saw this headache coming. Letting him go solo was a huge mistake. Sena is losing it, screaming that the head count is way too high. Even Daya looks stressed, wondering how on earth they'll feed this many mouths. A voice nearby snickers. Typical food is always her first thought. Asai approaches Errol, acknowledging that they need to prep for the coming conflict. She suggests actual mercenaries, but Errol just shrugs it off. War might be distant, but danger is always lurking. Lord Fahilia's enemies are everywhere. Noticing their long faces, Errol tells them to just trust the process. He's got a perfect track record, after all. Asai sighs, ignoring his cocky grin and dropping her protests. Errol throws her a thumbs up, grateful she's on board. He gestures toward the massive crowd waiting behind him. He'll need their expertise to mold this raw group into the ultimate Fahilia strike force. The strategy is already forming. He instructs them to scout the top talent and assemble an elite unit. No slackers allowed. He'll draft the training manual, but the actual drilling falls on Asai and Sena. Bathed in the midday sun, the two women stand tall, accepting the challenge without a second thought. Errol maintains a stoic front, but internally, he's hyped. Things are about to get incredibly busy. He pictures the rival kings and their petty games. Let them try. He's ready to humble them all. He'll personally put them in their place. Later, Errol trudges through the brush with Daya trailing behind. Gasping for air, Errol wonders why every wizard insists on living at the top of a mountain. Daya, still leaning on her crutch, explains that the old heads are just stubborn. The youth prefer the city lights. As the sun sets, Daya admits she misses the city vibe. Mountains are just empty and boring. Plus, the snacks up here suck. Errol chuckles, finding her priorities hilarious even in this heat. Inside a dusty library, Professor Glare looks up from his notes. It's been ages since their last encounter. He asks what the occasion is. Errol just holds up a finger, keeping his tone light and casual. He's just looking to make a purchase, but he warns it's a tall order, making Glare lean in. A glowing blue gem hovers, as Errol requests a top-tier monostone, nothing less than A-class quality. Glare adjusts his specs, noting that such artifacts are strictly tracked by the magic tower. He asks why Errol came to a back alley shop. Errol knows the professor already has the answer. The tower has blacklisted him. Errol's gaze turns cold. Glare wonders what he's really planning. Standard mages are common, but high-level artifacts? Those are game changers on the battlefield. Errol keeps it simple. He just wants to safeguard his people and his land. No more, no less. Glare nods, but asks what's in it for him. Errol flashes a knowing, predatory grin. He makes a money sign with his hand. The professor is far too brilliant to ignore a massive payday. Errol always settles his accounts with interest. Glare strokes his beard as Errol's smile widens. The man acts refined, but Errol knows he's a total cheapskate who can't resist a gold mine. Finally, the deal is struck. Glare warns it'll take time, and Errol happily agrees to the wait. Back in the forest, Errol stretches his tired limbs. Another piece of the puzzle is finally in place. Errol craved a breather, but Daya suddenly dropped to her knees beside him, leaving him completely baffled. Daya's mind raced over the insane price he'd promised that mage. It was pure madness. Errol told her to chill since his pockets were deep. Then, he leaned in and whispered a secret. Daya stood frozen while Errol smirked. He just revealed the true extent of his massive fortune. Gripping her shoulders, Errol mentioned that didn't even count the queen's stolen loot. There was zero to fear. Time to return to the castle. Later in Philelia, Errol slammed a mysterious document onto the table. Facing the mages, he declared the operation active. As one mage scanned the draft, the tension was palpable. They needed to finish before the war erupted. Every detail was strictly top secret. Absolute silence was mandatory. While the mages trembled in fear, Errol gave a sheepish grin. He introduced them to the joys of overtime. Luckily, the pay was fat, so he urged them to stay motivated. This was for their own benefit. Afterward, Errol decided to clear his head in the capital. With his hands clasped behind him, Errol walked while Asai trailed, questioning the purpose of their outing. He claimed it was just a stroll. Tugging her arm, he mentioned his various wartime deals. Asai broke into a cold sweat. They eventually halted right before the legendary Golden Gate. Errol gestured toward the Imperial Academy. The massive four-story structure looked more like a fortress. Since Asai's brother studied there, Errol insisted they visit. He pushed the gates open as the legend unfolded. This academy was the ultimate elite school, handpicked by the imperial bloodline for noble heirs. Even with private tutors, high-ranking nobles still flocked here. While walking, Errol dropped a bombshell on Asai. He silenced her objections instantly. Every time she got a break, she just buried herself in more work. Did she really want to avoid her brother? Asai looked down, insisting the prince shouldn't bother coming along. Errol told her to drop the act. He wasn't a heartless boss. He produced a VIP pass marked with red. He was 10 steps ahead, leaving Asai speechless. Soon, they were crossing a bridge inside the campus. Errol observed the noble students, realizing he knew next to nothing about Asai's only sibling. Hands behind his head, Errol asked for his location. Asai simply closed her eyes. She wasn't sure of his exact spot, but she'd spot him in any crowd instantly. People always said they were twins. Suddenly, a blonde boy appeared, clutching a green notebook. Errol asked if that was the target. Asai's eyes widened as she recognized him immediately. She whispered his name, Ares. So that's him, Errol thought, watching 3 girls corner the boy. Ares backed against the window, sweating. One girl demanded to know if he'd accepted her proposal. Ares stammered that it was difficult. Errol was shocked. Even in elite schools, bullies were everywhere. Asai held Errol back, wanting to watch. The girls finally vanished, leaving Ares to fix his tie. Asai rushed over, grabbing him. She demanded answers, leaving Ares completely blindsided by her arrival. He couldn't fathom how she got in. Meanwhile, Asai was fuming over those girls' intentions. Despite his letters saying he was fine, Ares looked terrified as he hugged his notebook tight. Asai demanded the truth, but he stayed silent. She sat down, frustrated, until Errol stepped forward. Seeing Asai this rattled was a first. Errol told her to breathe and let him handle the kid. He approached Aries, placing a hand on his shoulder and introducing himself as his sister's employer. Aries stammered, "The third prince?" Errol told him to ditch the titles and explain the situation. Was he being bullied? He meant that girl from earlier. Aries denied it, though his body language disagreed. Errol swore to keep it a secret. Sweating, Aries finally named her Haya Kurt, the youngest daughter of Marquis Kurt. That name definitely rang a bell. Errol recalled the Marquis from his birthday bash. He hadn't seemed like the villainous type. Errol pondered. So this girl was terrorizing his bodyguard's little brother? Aries looked like he was about to break. Aries began to explain the trauma. He remembered her pinning him against the cold wall. Errol urged him to speak. The memory became crystal clear, Lady Kurt flashing a wicked grin while calling out his name. "Let's date," Aries blurted out, tears threatening to spill as he finally bared his heart. Errol just sat there, completely stunned by the sudden, emotional confession. Clutching his pen and paper, Aries was hit by a wave of pure embarrassment. He bolted away, screaming that dating was off the table since they were only 11. But Lady Kurt wasn't about to take no for an answer. While Aries sobbed about his instant rejection, Errol tried to process the chaotic drama unfolding. The pursuit didn't stop there. It wasn't just her either. Every girl in class seemed to treat poor Aries like some adorable, prize-winning puppy. He recalled the suffocating way they'd always swarm him, his shoulders slumping in defeat as he stared gloomily at the floor. Aries insisted it wasn't exactly bullying, just way too much to handle. That's when Errol realized Aries was blissfully unaware of his own massive popularity. Letting out a heavy, bone-tired sigh, Aries admitted he was already exhausted by these complicated childhood flings. He turned his gaze away, feeling completely drained. He was at a total loss on how to handle her. Suddenly, Errol pointed a finger and asked why he didn't just confront her face to face. Aries jumped out of his skin, stammering to know how long she'd been lurking there. She simply replied that she had returned for a reason. She still had unfinished business with Aries, but first, she demanded to know exactly who this strange crowd of people was. Scratching his head, Errol assured her they weren't some shady crew. He then casually gestured toward Asai to introduce her to the girl. He boldly announced that Haya was essentially her future sister-in-law. Asai froze, her brain short-circuiting at the sheer audacity of that claim. Aries was cringing hard. Haya calmly noted she already knew about Aries' sister, while Errol leaned in to whisper something secret to Asai. With perfect poise, Haya introduced herself as the youngest daughter of the prestigious Kurt family, but she wasn't done with her introductions yet. She nonchalantly dropped a bombshell. She intended to date Asai's little brother. The revelation left Asai completely floored and utterly speechless. Errol just chuckled, finding her boldness absolutely legendary. Meanwhile, a bewildered Asai turned to him, desperate for some guidance on what to do next. Errol reasoned that since there was no bad blood between their houses, they should just let the kids navigate their own hearts. Asai protested, claiming Aries felt pressured. But Errol pointed out the obvious truth. Aries never once said he actually hated the girl. He was just overwhelmed. Plus, Errol added that the Kurt family were absolute sharks when it came to making bank through savvy investments. Through those smart investments, staying close to her could provide a massive, long-term boost to their own family's future prospects. Asai frowned, clearly not vibing with that cold, calculating logic. Errol quickly backtracked, insisting the financial gain was just a side perk. If there's a spark, why not just watch and see where things lead? Asai finally conceded that his point was fair enough for now. Still, she wondered if Haya wasn't the issue. Why did Aries keep pushing her away? Errol figured it was probably just a classic case of male ego. He couldn't help but wonder if something else was brewing. Right then, a blue-haired boy stormed toward Aries and the young Lady Kurt. Fuming with rage, he screamed at Aries, accusing him of hitting on Lady Kurt again. Lucian demanded to know how a nobody like him dared to charm her. Before Lucian could finish his insult, Haya stepped in front of Aries, snapping back that she was the one doing the pursuing, not him. Lucian's temper exploded as he protested. He couldn't fathom why she'd choose Aries over him. Errol watched, realizing the situation just got complicated. A messy love triangle? What on earth was going on here? Lucian kept ranting, mocking Aries' family for their supposed downfall and loss of status. He spat that Aries' sister was nothing but a village worker and that dating him would only drag the Kurt family's reputation through the mud. This little brat had finally crossed the line. Aries stepped up, warning Lucian to stop trashing his sister and Lady Kurt immediately. That only fueled Lucian's fire as he swung a fist. But in a flash, Errol caught his arm, coolly suggesting it was time to change the subject. He issued a chilling warning. If Lucian kept poking his nose where it didn't belong, someone might just snap it right off his face. Lucian barked back, questioning why an outsider like Errol was even there. Errol smirked, noting that unlike him, he actually had permission to be present. Suddenly, another presence made itself known. A man with striking blue hair stepped forward, walking calmly into the middle of the heated confrontation. He demanded to know what all the racket was about. Errol sighed, already drained by the crowd, while Lucian's face lit up at his brother's arrival. Errol couldn't help but notice that this newcomer looked way more like a strict professor than a typical academy student. When the older brother questioned Errol's identity, Errol just grinned, having anticipated that exact question for quite some time. With a graceful bow, he introduced himself as the third prince of Ernesia and the rightful master of Fahelia village. The man stood frozen in absolute shock, wondering why royalty was here. Awkwardly, he suggested they move the discussion to a private room. Moments later, they were settled inside a quiet room. The blue-haired man took a seat, his previous arrogance now completely gone. He offered a stiff apology for his brother's behavior, promising that Lucian would say sorry later. His name was Cadell Lucen. As the eldest Lucen son and the academy's fencing instructor, he held himself with pride. Errol insisted the apology be directed at Ares, but Cadell's tone turned cold, dismissing Errol's involvement. In his twisted view, Ares was actually the one who had sparked the whole mess. He argued that if anyone owed an apology, it was the Purnell family. Asai looked on, completely baffled by his sheer audacity. She stood her ground, knowing Ares was innocent. Errol, meanwhile, was left wondering how this childish love triangle had spiraled so out of control. The truth finally clicked. This academy wasn't just for classes, it was a high-stakes playground for noble clout. Errol saw the boy was just a family pawn. Even noble goals can rot into something toxic over time. Cadell claimed the Lucians and Carrots were untouchable, so the Purnells had zero right to interfere here. Errol's blood boiled. A teacher spewing such bias? Treating the Purnell name like trash was the final straw. He couldn't stand them viewing his people as mere pebbles. Slamming his hands down, Errol surged to his feet. Absolute nonsense, Errol snapped, closing the distance. He demanded to know since when family names dictated children's hearts. He challenged the teacher directly, asking if their curriculum still prioritized outdated discrimination over actual education. Cadell didn't flinch, coldly stating that rank is everything. In his world, networking isn't a choice, it's a duty. Errol smirked, revealing Asia was a royal knight. Cadell's confidence instantly shattered as he turned to escape. He muttered a warning for his brother, telling Errol to keep the Purnells from causing any more misunderstandings. Knowing Cadell would just play dirty, Errol barked a command to halt. The power in his voice was absolute. Cadell turned pale. Errol grinned, pointing out that Haya liked Ares, and Cadell's brother was just ruining the vibe. He then threw down the gauntlet, proposing they settle this drama the traditional, high-stakes noble way. The simplest fix for love troubles, Errol chirped, leaving everyone speechless. Cadell nervously asked if he meant a duel. Exactly, Errol declared. A total showdown, the Purnell heirs against the Lucian heirs. Winner takes all. Cadell laughed it off at first, calling the entire idea pure insanity. He wasn't about to gamble like that, but Errol baited the hook. If Cadell won, Errol would personally solve their family's massive, post-famine food shortage. Cadell froze. Was the prince serious? Errol nodded, but added one high-stakes condition to the deal. To win, the Purnells needed a clean sweep. If the Lucians won even one round, they'd take the victory. It seemed reckless, but Cadell saw pure profit. Winning this meant his family would be set for life. He felt invincible. His younger brother was older, bigger, and stronger than Ares. There was no way to lose. Plus, as a former elite officer, Cadell knew he'd easily beat a mere escort knight like Asia. He bowed deeply, accepting the challenge. You don't say no when a prince offers a jackpot like that. Errol cheerfully swore on the Ernesia name. The deal was sealed with the ironclad honor of the crown. Asia nearly had a total meltdown. She clutched her head in horror at Errol's chaotic decision. She usually ignored his antics, but this was next level. She exploded, demanding to know what he was thinking. Errol tried to play it cool, but Asia wasn't having it. He admitted he might have gone overboard. But think about it, he said, his tone shifting. Are you really okay with his insults? He reminded her how Cadell spit on their pride and treated Ares like some worthless roadside pebble. Asia bit her lip. She claimed she couldn't let personal feelings interfere with her duty as his bodyguard. Errol shook his head. Insulting his knight was a shot at him. He wasn't letting the Lucians walk away. This was the beginning of the end for them. Grinning, he asked if she wanted to vent some rage. Ready to give that worm the beating of a lifetime? He asked, wanting her to unleash her full power. This was her chance to show Ares what a legendary, top-tier knight his big sister truly was. Asia exhaled, finally locking in. But then Ares piped up, whining that he stood no chance against Lucien. Errol rolled his eyes. To him, it was just a playground scrap. He told the boy to just finish it. When Ares kept moping, Errol grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look him right in the eye. Doesn't it burn? He asked. Aren't you tired of being bullied and treated like garbage by that brat? Ares looked down, admitting he wanted to fight, but didn't want to ruin his sister's hard restoration work. He thought he just had to endure and get stronger. Errol stopped him right there. When exactly is later? Errol pressed. He grilled the boy until Aries was on the verge of tears. He explained that waiting for the perfect moment is a trap. Some fires must be put out immediately. If you keep hesitating, you'll just rot away, Errol warned. He began to ignite the boy's hidden spirit. This was the moment to show the world what happens when you mess with the Purnell bloodline. He wasn't telling him to be a thug, but this time, the third prince was backing his every move. Errol threw a confident arm around Aries, his words hitting home. The pep talk worked. Aries' eyes ignited with a newfound fire. Errol smirked to himself. His psychological game was playing out exactly as he had envisioned. He began detailing a foolproof blueprint for victory. To Errol, the concept of a noble duel was a complete farce. In truth, it's just sanctioned savagery for the masses, a bloodthirsty spectacle that naturally draws a massive crowd. Errol chuckled at the irony. Even though it was a children's spat, everyone from kids to elders was hungry for the drama. He took the worst seat available. Haya soon stomped over, fuming that they'd staged a duel without consulting her first. Errol offered a half-hearted apology for the lack of warning. He claimed they simply needed to teach Lucien a brutal lesson. Haya agreed Lucien deserved a beatdown, but she hated this method. She was worried since Aries was a total novice. The boy had even admitted he was clueless about fencing. Errol dismissed her concerns immediately. To him, actual skill was irrelevant. Haya was left speechless, arguing that combat ability was the only thing that mattered in a real duel. Errol remained unconvinced. By then, Aries had already stepped into the arena, nervously clutching a wooden practice sword. Errol teased that cunning beats brawn every time. He then casually asked Haya why she even liked a weakling like Aries, considering Lucien was a much better match for her status. Haya's reason? She simply thought Aries was too precious. She loved how he looked like he was about to burst into tears whenever she pinched him. She wanted to keep teasing him just to see that reaction. Blushing, she joked about devouring him, leaving Errol genuinely horrified. He seriously considered canceling the match right then. But with the third prince's nod, the judge stepped forward. The official ordered the boys to take their stances, then shouted the signal to commence the battle. Lucien charged like a madman, screaming for Aries to drop dead. Haya watched the scene with visible disgust. Simultaneously, Errol activated his magic, whispering precise instructions. Half step back, dodge right. Aries moved perfectly. Lucien was baffled as his strike hit nothing but air. Errol kept feeding Aries moves, making Lucien miss repeatedly. Aries was panting and lightheaded, but he followed the voice religiously. Finally, he swung and landed a clean hit. Lucien stumbled and collapsed. The surrounding children gasped in shock. Aries had dodged every single attack with impossible grace. Isai finally exhaled in relief. Meanwhile, Errol was having the time of his life, enjoying his secret manipulation. He was puppeteering the entire match, whispering directly into Aries' ear through a tiny, invisible communication port. It helped that Lucien's moves were painfully predictable. The boy fought exactly like a textbook, making his patterns easy to read. He praised Aries' performance, telling him to stay focused. Aries was utterly exhausted, but he refused to back down. Lucien scrambled up, his ego bruised. He was beyond furious that a brat was actually making him look pathetic. With a primal roar, he lunged for one final strike. Aries froze in a moment of pure panic. Errol calmed him instantly, ordering him to duck low and slash sharply upward. This was the decisive moment. Aries executed the command flawlessly. Haya's jaw dropped as Aries' sword landed a direct hit right between Lucien's legs. Lucien passed out from the sheer physical shock. Even the referee was stunned, but he eventually declared Aries the winner. Errol called the victory easy, and Aries was over the moon. Kaido walked past, muttering that his brother's loss was inevitable. He complained that Errol's sense of humor was too cruel. Errol just played dumb, though Kaido knew it was all tricks. Then, Izai and Kaido stepped up for their turn. Kaido vowed that, one way or another, he would end this nonsense. Aries sprinted back to Errol, glowing with pride over his win. Errol patted his head, acknowledging the boy's hard work. Haya rushed over and grabbed Aries' hands, squealing with joy. Errol watched her with a look of pure ick. He couldn't believe how intense she was. Aries' excitement vanished when he realized his sister was entering the ring next. He was terrified. He'd heard Lord Kaito was once the legendary leader of the 13 Knights. Errol confirmed the rumor. Kaito was clearly elite, but Errol wasn't worried. Isai was a beast. The third prince just watched with intense curiosity. Errol grinned proudly. Isai didn't become a knight just for the title, she was the real powerhouse of the family. In the ring, Kaito warned Isai he wouldn't be holding back. He demanded she fight him with her full strength. Kaito prided himself on never underestimating a foe. But before he could even react, Isai's fist sent him flying. Kaito's vision blurred as he was launched backward at terrifying speed. He was knocked out before he hit the ground. Spinning her spear with bored grace, Izai sighed. She'd intended to fight seriously, but that now seemed totally unnecessary. She noted that for a high-ranking knight, his resistance was shockingly low. Isai finally let out a satisfied breath. Ares cautioned Prince Errol against any future secret schemes. Flashing a knowing smirk, Errol reminded her that because of his intervention, her brother's reputation was finally saved. With a playful wink, he boasted that after today's showdown, nobody would dare disrespect him again. As for the pesky Lutzes, Errol vowed to silence them personally. He urged Ares to rest easy while he handled the fallout. Though grateful, Errol quietly pondered a darker truth. In the face of catastrophe, most people choose denial. On the surface, Ernesia's lords began gathering fresh recruits, drilling soldiers for an impending clash. Yet, their movements were far too timid to be called true war prep. Why waste gold if the storm never hits? Stockpiled blades and rations would just rot in dusty storehouses, creating a massive logistical nightmare. This uncertainty led many to bash the few leaders who prepared early. Errol, however, stood his ground with iron resolve, insisting they brace for the worst. Life drifted on in blissful ignorance until the first bombshell news finally dropped. Cut to the Merman Empire's capital. The emperor took the stage, his voice booming over the masses, announcing a declaration that would shake the entire continent. He demanded to know if they recognized their true enemy, the one sabotaging their very livelihoods. The crowd gasped in horror as he continued, accusing this foe of profiting from gaudy imports and illegally peddling paper, the empire's most sacred export. With white-knuckled fury, the emperor snarled that such blatant disrespect could no longer be tolerated. Unsheathing his blade, he branded Ernesia as the villain. For the sake of continental peace, he vowed to unite every victim against this scourge. Flanking him stood the iron-willed king of Daemania and the Grand Duke of Sagepon. Steel clashed as the emperor proclaimed their new unholy alliance, vowing to bring Ernesia to its knees. The bloodthirsty crowd erupted in a deafening roar as the rulers sealed their pact. Soon after, an ultimatum reached the Ernesian throne, cloaked in fake mercy. They demanded Ernesia cease all paper production, scrap their factories, and surrender their secret trade formulas. The demands? Hand over the gold and send Prince Errol into exile disguised as a foreign study trip. The emperor's rage exploded. They dared to bully his kingdom? He immediately triggered the full mobilization of his forces. He roared that their ancestral lands were sacred, and they wouldn't yield a single damn inch. Flashed to the Bizion fortress at Ernesia's edge. Chaos erupted as soldiers scrambled for their lives. The nightmare was here, the Three-Kingdom Alliance had finally crossed the horizon. Back at the palace, the atmosphere was thick with tension. A scout rushed in with grim news, reporting a massive wave of 100,000 troops closing in. But the prince knew this was just the tip of the spear. The true slaughter was still coming. As the empire's future, he had to hold the line at any cost. United, he declared. They were unbreakable. Fear had no place within these walls. Every crack was sealed tight. Not even a shadow could slip inside now. The war was officially on. Yet, Errol hadn't pulled the trigger on mobilization. While the world braced for impact, he was chilling with Dia. Lifting a silver dome to reveal a steaming cut of meat, he announced, it was time to let her inner foodie run wild. Dia's eyes sparkled. The aroma was absolutely heavenly. Savoring the tender rabbit stew, Errol noted its perfection. Most people would normally hesitate at the meat, but Dia scoffed. Those picky eaters had clearly never been desperate enough to munch on bugs or toxic fungi to survive. Wiping his mouth, Errol turned to his aide with a grin, teasing his next creation. Dia watched curiously as he began sorting through fresh supplies, betting on a dessert given the flour and dried fruits. But Errol just teased it was a state secret. It was surreal seeing a high-ranking lord dominate the kitchen while most nobles couldn't even boil water. Errol flexed that he was the mastermind behind every recipe their massive corporation sold. Then came a rare moment of honesty. If his grand schemes ever crashed and burned, he'd simply vanish and become a world-class chef. Moments later, he pulled a golden tray from the oven. Dia's first bite was pure bliss, though she joked it was a total calorie bomb waiting to happen. Errol explained it was high-energy fuel designed for soldiers, since typical military rations tasted like absolute garbage. Fearing he'd be left holding the bag if things went south, he desperately needed a failsafe. With visible hesitation, he raised a nagging concern. Orel hadn't greenlit the call to arms yet. Errol simply rubbed his neck, his expression unreadable, and confessed that he was hell-bent on squeezing in every last second of drills. He was racing against the clock, fueled by a frantic urgency to prep his men. Cut to the front lines, pure carnage. Steel bit into steel as waves of enemy invaders swarmed the fortress ramparts like a plague of locusts. Launch the counter-offensive now, the prince roared, his face twisted in rage as his promised reinforcements were still nowhere to be found. His men swore help was coming, but the enemy didn't care. They kept clawing their way up, mounting a brutal assault that felt impossible to stop. Things were looking grim. Just then, a scout burst in, clutching a report that drained the color from his face. A second host was closing in, numbering a staggering 210,000. The prince stood paralyzed as the horizon turned black with soldiers. He hadn't predicted a force this massive, let alone that they'd be at his doorstep so soon. Meanwhile, tension was reaching a boiling point within the Arnesia Empire's inner sanctum. The emperor slumped at the head of the table, drained, while his advisors barked at one another in a chaotic frenzy. His blood boiled, because the enemy ranks were swelling by the hour. Yet, some delusional officials still claimed victory was just a heartbeat away. One noble finally snapped, screaming that they were fighting a losing battle. He demanded an immediate tactical retreat to fortify their defenses elsewhere, while a green-haired aide insisted the emperor's life was the priority. Seeing no other choice, the sovereign let out a frustrated sigh and relented. He commanded a full withdrawal of the vanguard, emphasizing that the citizenry needed to grasp the sheer gravity of this impending doom. Rising from his throne, he extended a commanding hand, summoning every lord and noble, with enough strength left to wield a blade, to march toward the front. He declared a total mobilization of the empire's might. To Ariel, it was absolutely mind-blowing that his elder sibling would gamble his life just for a shot at battlefield glory. It was unheard of. The imperial bloodline was usually kept far from the stench of death. But then, an unexpected summons landed in Ariel's lap, catching him completely off guard. Dealing with a 3-to-1 disadvantage was already a nightmare. He knew nothing broke a spirit faster than being outnumbered. Ariel rose, declaring that if he was going to endure this chaos, he needed an empire that wasn't a smoking ruin. For the time being, he'd shed his status and fight as a common grunt. Leaving a skeleton crew to guard the estate, Ariel geared up for the meat grinder. He gave his eagle, Frey, a firm pat, whispering that a high-stakes mission awaited them. As he turned, he found Kania standing there, and he suggested she remain safe in Fahilia. Kania instantly fired back, refusing to be sidelined. It ate her alive that she was stuck playing spectator, while the world burned. Ariel sighed at her relentless stubbornness. He recognized her lethal skill with a blade would be a massive asset, but what kind of man would willingly shove the person he loved into the eye of a storm? He figured their father would use the estate's safety as an excuse to keep her caged. But then, Kania reached out, gripping his shoulders firmly. She thanked him for his concern, but made one thing clear. She wasn't letting him face hell by himself. If her little brother was heading to the front, his big sister was going right along with him. Ariel finally cracked a smile, exhaling all his tension. Seeing that fire in her eyes, he knew there was no stopping her. "Fine," he murmured. "Then you'll need this." In one fluid motion, he unsheathed his blade. He presented the weapon to Kania, explaining that Lady Fahilia had passed it to his care. Kania gasped, her eyes widening. This wasn't just any blade. It was a legendary Kenzie's heirloom, forged through generations. Its name was Kelsha, a tribute to the family's founding patriarch. Even the master dwarves hailed its perfection, claiming such a masterpiece was nearly impossible to replicate in this lifetime. Stunned, she asked if she was truly worthy. Ariel just smirked, reminding her that as the kingdom's third swordmaster, she didn't exactly have a choice. As Kania stood there, mesmerized by the steel, Ariel slipped away, leaving her to bond with the legendary weapon. He figured a true gentleman knew when to make a graceful exit. His new mission was simple: minimize the body count. For Ariel, no medal or title could ever top the feeling